Thank you, Chair. I'm going to wait for Mr. Gibson to flip over the screen. Good evening, Chair and UA Board. The purpose for tonight's meeting is for the Board to take action on two agreed upon tax increment financing sharing agreements with taxing entities in support of the Sand Creek Business Center URA. During this meeting, we will also provide an update as to the progress staff has made with formation and redevelopment efforts for the Sand Creek landfill. Excuse me. This slide is a brief overview and refresher of the overall general purpose for the Urban Renewal Authority and efforts to support the remediation of blight and removal of barriers to support reinvestment in the community. High-level purpose, as you see on the screen, with just the statement I made, and obviously the leveraging of tax increment financing in support of public investment for projects within the private sector. This slide here provides a general note with respect to the benefits that the Sand Creek Business Center redevelopment project will be able to bring to the general area. Once again, removing conditions of blight that could pose a health, safety, or aesthetics concern, enhancing the community perception, improving the intangible and tangible benefits in the character of an area, improved public infrastructure in support of not only the development at hand within the URA district itself, but also those in and around it, and being able to provide an investment that's economically beneficial to the community, either through the sustainable building of employment opportunities, increasing value of the property itself, but also other properties, and being able to attract immediate or new businesses to the immediate and surrounding area or serving as a catalyst. The subject site to this URA formation is 65 acres in size and is currently undeveloped. Previously, the property served as a landfill, which has since been capped with an environmental covenant restricting its use to nothing else other than passive maintenance of the land. Site 1, as you see in the upper left corner, is currently zoned industrial, while Site 2 is zoned agricultural. Brief development update for you all as it relates to the redevelopment efforts. The developer has submitted the required entitlement to rezone Site 2. Once again, this area here located in the lower right hand of the site to match the zoning on Site 1, as shown here. The development plan has been submitted across the entire site for approximately 840,000 plus or minus square feet of warehousing, distribution, and manufacturing development. Additionally, the developer has worked with CDPHE and EPA, where the parties have agreed to the release and termination of the environmental covenant and replace it with a notice of environmental use restriction that corresponds with the proposed development as you all see on the screen. Comments on the environmental use restrictions are being accepted until March 30th, which at such time CDPHE will finalize the proposed restriction and record with Adams County accordingly. Once again, that is a precursor for their ability to continue moving forward in our process here at the city with respect to the development of the site, and it appears that they are on track to do such. Per state statute, urban renewal district formation must follow a defined process for consideration and ultimately approval by City Council. Outlined on the screen, City staff has steps 1 and 2 of the 4 steps within the process completed. Briefly, a blight conditions study must be conducted and demonstrate that in the middle of the 4 of the 11 blight conditions have been met. Staff presented in the Q4 of last year to the board that 10 of the 11 conditions were met. Next, taxing entity impact statements must be completed and provided to each respective taxing entity to initiate negotiations. These reports, which are attached within your packet as backup, were prepared and shared with each entity in December of last year. Prior to initiating the formal step of number 3, staff met informally out of courtesy and respect of our relation with each entity to provide background and purpose for the formation. We are currently in the negotiation phase as noted on the slide, and it's important to note that negotiations toward an agreement must address, without limitation, estimated impacts of the urban renewal plan or the project or the district on county or district services associated solely with the urban renewal project itself or plan. In short, the agreements are only subject to the impacts directly related to the development. So to that point, in our thinking in approaching and working with the taxing entities, staff took an approach of presenting the raw data, the development program, and the tax increment that's generated over the 25-year period, and allowing each entity to qualitatively and or quantitatively provide a proposal to city staff that met their needs under CRS 31-25-107. Before jumping into the taxing entity impact estimates, thought it would be helpful to demonstrate how the revenues of the URA are contemplated with a basic TIF model tax increment, which is revenue borne to the URA, is shown in green, while the existing tax base, which is adjusted every 2 years, remains with the taxing entities. The agreements in question tonight and at future meetings will be the splitting of the revenue within the green area. This slide before you provides a snapshot of all taxing entity TIF that would be generated over the 25-year period. The more detailed impact reports are provided as backup materials to this item. We have our consultant, Ricker Cunningham, the preparers of the impact reports, available tonight if there are any questions. So that brings us tonight to the 2 agreements that are before you, which are with both the Fire District and the Mile High Flood District. The Fire District and the Mile High Flood District staff have presented the agreements which have been approved by their boards, and the executed version of those agreements from both districts are in your packets for your review. It is staff's recommendation that the board co-sign the agreements to meet the requirements of CRS as stipulated in the previous slides. Next steps, it's contemplated that we will bring the remaining 4 agreements forward to the board for action on April 18. If the 4 remaining agreements are approved by both the board and the respective districts, then the intent is to bring the URA plan for approval on May 2nd. And with that, I'll open it up to questions or discussion by the board.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers. Does anybody on the board have any questions? Board Member Douglas.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, I was trying to bring up the presentation again to catch something that you had said in the presentation, and I couldn't pull it up. But you mentioned something about them having to be approved with the CDPHE. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, ma'am. So given that this is a former Superfund site, in 2007 and re-recorded in 2008, an environmental covenant was placed on the property, given it was capped for passive maintenance, and quite frankly, passive maintenance and management of the ongoing brush and capped cap landfill. It was at that time there wasn't an identified use for the use of the landfill. So until such time, that environmental covenant remained in place. Given that there is a developer that is willing to develop a higher and better use and able to meet various, I'll say, restrictions and or imposed conditions, the CDPHE in concert with EPA have now established a use restriction that will comport with the development that is on the plan. So they will be required under CDPHE and EPA to deliver and to develop that project as you see, based on that restriction.
So it's nothing that they will not be able to move forward on then if they don't comply, or how does that work? Because it looks like the project is moving forward, so I want to make sure that.
Yeah. So along every step of the way, there will be a referral to both CDPHE and EPA to ensure that the proposed entitlement with respect to the rezoning, with respect to the development plan, and the actual building permits for vertical construction, they will have an opportunity to ensure that what we have is in concert with the disclosed documents that are tied to their use restriction.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions from the board? Board Member Noble?
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Rogers. Really appreciate it. Could you summarize the pros and cons of these that we're going to be voting on tonight?
Not quite sure about where you're going with that question, ma'am.
Are we voting on each of these agreements tonight that are in the URA packet?
Yes, ma'am. You're voting on the Mile High Flood District and the South Adams County Fire District. You're not voting on the other 4 remaining documents until April 18th.
All right. And then it appears as if we had been involved in the writing of them. Did we meet with both the flood district and fire?
We met on multiple occasions with both districts, one informally and formally multiple times, kind of once again providing them with the raw data, the development program, the increment that is to be generated, basically the tax increment impact reports, and allowed for them to review internally, then to come back and provide a proposal on what they believed was the appropriate TIF sharing to mitigate the impacts of their development on their services.
Okay, so in reading them, they are to the advantage of the Urban Renewal Authority, or at least equal benefit, and you would recommend signing them?
Yes, ma'am. It is required under state law, just for those that are listening at home. Under state law, we are required to have equal benefit. A urban renewal formation plan cannot move forward if it's implemented, that if there is a favorable impact one way or the other, it has to be jointly agreed upon. If it's not able to be jointly agreed upon, and as noted in one of our slides, then you have to go to mediation for that then to be determined for both parties based on the facts.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Mr. Rogers? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to adopt Resolution URA 2022-08. Board Member Grimes?
So moved.
Board Member Hurst?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution URA 2022-08. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, have a motion and second to adopt Resolution URA 2022-08. We'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. This time, we will adjourn to the regular city council meeting. We'll start that at 6:25. This is a hybrid meeting of the City Council. Members of the public can view this meeting live on Channel 8, the city's website and YouTube. Live Spanish translation services are being provided for tonight's council meeting by telephone. Please dial 720-386-9023 and use code 104091 *.
Se ofrecen servicios de interpretación en español para esta reunión del Consejo Municipal por teléfono. Marque el número 720-386-9023 y utilice el código 104091 #.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. The city clerk is the host of the Zoom meeting. Speakers will be able to unmute themselves when recognized. This time, I'll call the regular meeting to order and ask city clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Huseman.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Alan Thomas.
Present.
Councilmember Madera.
Present.
Councilmember Davis. Present. Councilmember Noble.
Present.
Councilmember Hurst. Councilmember Grimes.
Present.
Councilmember Ford.
Present.
Councilmember Douglas.
Present.
Mayor Huseman, you have a quorum, and as a reminder, council members, please unmute your microphone for the broadcast and recording. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Looks like we're all present. This time, I will invite those present and remote to join us in a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All public comment will occur during citizen communication except for public hearings. Persons who registered to speak under multiple items will be allowed to speak multiple times. Per council policy, citizen communication is the time on our agenda for the public to address council on business and affairs of the city. The city council is not able to hear comments at this time on land use matters that are before or may come before council. Please reserve such comments for the appropriate public hearing. As a reminder, we take your comments seriously, but do not generally respond to comments until later in the evening. Council must wait until administrative council business to take action in response to citizen communication. Council members can ask questions of speakers if desired. The city needed advance registration in order to participate virtually in citizen communication for this meeting. If you're currently in the Zoom meeting to speak during citizen communication, please listen for me to call your name and the clerk will unmute you so you may begin. If you do not respond or are disconnected, you may miss your chance to comment. Those attending in person to speak during citizen communication will be called upon after virtual comment has concluded. Per council policy, citizen communication cannot occur before the time stated in the agenda without council approval. The estimated time in the agenda for citizen communication is 6:30 p.m. The time is now 6:28 p.m. Looking for, does anybody on council wish to make a motion to allow citizen communication to take place at this time? Yep, 2 minutes. Councilmember Grimes?
So moved.
Councilmember Madera?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to allow citizen communication to occur at 6:28 p.m. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. We can proceed with citizen communication. Please give your name and address for the record and keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. If a council member wants to ask a question, please ask to be recognized when the speaker is finished. Thank you. First up, we have Brianna Young.
Brianna, you should be able to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Can you hear me?
We can, yes, Brianna.
Great. Hi, my name is Brianna Young, and I am a resident in the Buffalo Highlands community. Do you need my full address?
If you would like.
Okay. No, I'll just leave it at the Buffalo Highlands neighborhood. My family and I moved to Commerce City in 2018 when we purchased a new build home with Lennar. One of the deciding factors of us moving here was the promise of a neighborhood park that was to be built just down the street from our home. The sales rep from Lennar at the time showed us a map of the proposed neighborhood with the park. However, as more people moved to the neighborhood, we saw the park disappear from the maps that were shown to newer residents. And now the area where there was once a proposed park is said to have even more homes. In an attempt to bring our growing community together, myself and several other residents founded a neighborhood relations committee for Phase 1 of Buffalo Highlands. Last summer, we held an incredibly successful community block party with food trucks, bounce houses, and carnival games. However, this event had to be held on the main road into the neighborhood, which is Landmark Drive, because we do not have any usable space for large community events. With over 1,000 homes proposed for the entire neighborhood, we cannot continue to hold events to bring our community together when we do not have access to safe and usable space. Knowing that Buffalo Highlands community is footing the bill for the road from Buckley to Tower, we strongly feel that we are owed a park. This is especially true considering we were promised a park, but the city allowed Lennar to simply erase the park space from their building plans. The two proposed parks in the space north of 96 and to the south in Second Creek neighborhood are not what we were promised and are frankly inaccessible to Buffalo Highlands residents because we would need to cross the busy highway-esque 96th Avenue without a crosswalk, let alone a stoplight to safely get to the other side. All this is not for a lack of effort on our part. My husband and several other neighbors have worked with city officials to attempt to address the issue of our community getting a park. However, they have been getting what seems like a runaround for several months. They have worked diligently with city officials to find a solution, again, however, with little to no progress. We have found the individuals we have worked with to be sympathetic to our cause, but our park issue did not make the meeting agenda this evening as was requested by our mayor. Like much of the city, we continue to see an exponential numbers of homes being built, but very few resources such as parks, space for community events, and retail stores for people who have lived here and helped establish our community. I come to you to ask you to address our park issue as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? None, we thank you. Excuse me, Councilmember Madera.
Not for the speaker, but can staff give us a quick update on progress that we made?
Yeah. We chatted, I would say, last Monday when thinking of making a selection on 2K bond projects. We had identified, obviously, the Second Creek Neighborhood Park, which is located at the northeast corner of Telluride Drive and 88th Avenue, which is on the southernmost boundary of Buffalo Highlands, as a project to engage and support over the 3-year required process of expending those funds for construction. Additionally, in that meeting, there was an add-on discussion about looking at a park just south of 96th Avenue, currently where there is a underpass for the Buffalo Highlands neighborhood and Second Creek Farms as well, to be able to traverse north of 96 to what will be a much larger community park slated within the Reunion development. But in that area south of 96, for staff to also look at the construction of a much a smaller park of around 2 acres or so as part of our 2023 CIPP process. We have opened our CIPP process with the intent of coming before the council at the end of Q2, beginning of Q3 for determination on how to move that project forward.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for the speaker? Councilmember Noble?
I have a follow-up question for you, Mr. Rogers, a couple of them. There's also another funding source, which is the reserves for the city. So that's a potential rather than being part of the SIP process. Is that true?
The reserves are a part of the capital improvement program, project program. So we would actually use those reserves for any advancement of that project, given the capital infrastructure.
So it would be another alternative then?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. And at the study session last week, I had asked about the number of homes, and the speaker mentioned that there will be 1,000 homes in Buffalo at least that equal number or more in Second Creek Farms. I think the rule of thumb is 1 10-acre park per 1,000 homes.
I'd have to look into the Prairie Race Action Plan, ma'am, for a much more defined equation of how to determine the parks. But what I will share with you generally is that the Prairie Race Action Plan looked at a overlapping of park systems, starting at its highest most with your community park and then your neighborhood park, and having a either half square mile or a half mile or a mile radius that developments are able to touch within that. And that's what identified the park system that we have currently today in our comp plan and other reference documents to be delivered is from the basis of that Prairie Way Actions Plan by Parks Rec and Golf.
Okay, great. And I would appreciate if we could get the exact numbers to us about the number of homes in Buffalo Highlands and the number of homes in the Second Creek Farms project. You don't, not necessarily the second, but so that we can have that to evaluate our decisions as well. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Douglas?
Thank you. So I would suggest that we meet with these people, again, in the neighborhood, such as Mr. Tolbert was willing to do. I believe that we owe that to these people so that we can, again, look at the possibilities. And so it's not just something that we're visualizing on paper and expecting them to be satisfied with that. So I think we owe them another visit.
If I may, ma'am, ask a clarifying question. Is the intent of the meeting or the expectation to discuss the delivery of a private park or the provision of a public park, which obviously have different controlling factors and our ability to influence?
Well, I think we look at the different possibilities, but I think we meet with them and we do a site visit. I think that would be worth our time and effort.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no other requests for questions, we'll move on to our next speaker, who is Hillary Leich, and I apologize if I mispronounced that.
It's actually Leich.
Apologies.
Hillary, you should be able to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Thank you. So I'm kind of repeating what Brianna said. I'm a resident of Buffalo Highlands at 9566 Quintero Street. Since I did take the time to type this up, I'm going to just read what I typed, even though you guys have responded to her comments. I'm speaking tonight because I'm feeling frustrated with the lack of movement on the Buffalo Highlands Park. As residents, we have done more research than any resident should have to do. We've read the land development code and probably know the ins and outs of it more than most sitting in that room. We have utilized Adams County Public Record Search and reviewed plats and agreements with the city and developers. I have spent countless hours on emails, correspondence, Zoom calls, in-person meetings in my neighborhood, and have watched more city council meetings than I've ever wanted. I've done more than my share of due diligence on this issue. We are told the squeaky wheel gets the oil, but more is not always better, or to give you all the space to work. All of this in the same breath as don't give up and let the issue be ignored. We had a glimmer of hope with the announcement of the new park projects, but then city staff did not address our park. It was a big letdown until Mayor Huseman pushed city staff about the allocation of $2 million for a park, and it appeared it would be discussed during tonight's meeting, but it did not make it on the agenda. Like Mayor Huseman stated during the last study session, you're just kicking the can down the road. If there are questions about the location of the park, me and other residents are more than happy to meet on site with city staff. Our neighborhood solely funded 96 on the Second Creek Bridge, and we were given 0 amenities. We don't even have a safe way of crossing 96 to get to other neighborhood amenities. I feel like our community was robbed of what should be a standard feature in all neighborhoods. So I'm here to ask that you put this as an agenda item to be voted on during the next city council meeting. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Leach. Does anybody on council have any questions? Seeing none, we thank you for your time this evening. Next up is Eloy Espinoza.
Eloy, you should be able to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Alrighty, good evening, Commerce City staff and council. I'm gonna start this off by a quote I took from the Denver Post from September 6, 2014. Mr. Sean Ford said, "The extension of 96th Avenue is a great example of public and private sector working together to benefit the broader community. I want you to know the residents living here are the broader community." Also, according to this Denver Post article and the Stratus Company's website, we put about approximately 16.6 million in our bond to fund 96 to make it what it is today. Because it's 6.6, that's approximately going to be $14 million total that we're going to end up paying back because it is a bond. When I look at Prairie Farms Metro District, which is also East Point by Richmond, they only have $9 million in debt, from my understanding, while we hold 18 million total and financially supported 96. Second Creek paid road impact fees and can't pay for the expansion. Well, according to our IGA, we paid road impact fees and we took on the debt to expand 96, like I said, what it is today. I believe we're getting double dipped on. I'll read a section from our IGA. City staff will recommend to City Council that the city require other properties in the vicinity beneficiating from the improvements to contribute to the cost of the improvements based upon appropriation of the total cost. I don't believe this happened. And if it did happen, I feel like I need an explanation to understand why we have double the debt than our neighboring communities. As of right now, the closest thing I can compare my home buying experience in Commerce City is going to the dealership only to find out I bought a lemon. Mr. Mayor Huseman had some great ideas last study session that would make the prices of the homes more transparent. And I think that's something that we should all consider, especially with all the debt that we have, because at the end of the day, some of the benefits that he explained really are great, and our bond debt, we have no benefits to. Thank you, and that is it.
Thank you, Mr. Espinoza. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, we thank you for your time this evening. We'll next move up to Sylvia Ariola.
Sylvia, if you're in the meeting and can hit *9 on your phone or use the raise hand function in Zoom. Sylvia? Mayor Huseman, I do not see Sylvia in the meeting.
Thank you, sir. Next will be Robert London.
Robert, if you're in the meeting, you can hit *9 on your phone or use the raise hand function in Zoom. Robert London. Mayor Huseman, I do not see Robert in the meeting.
Thank you, sir. Next will be Deborah Helbuk.
Deborah, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Hello, my name is Debbie Helbach. I'm a longtime resident of Commerce City. My husband and I have been here our whole lives, and we've raised all of our children here. I'm talking to you about our district today and our high school, our District 14. I want you to know that I've done all my schooling here. My husband has too. I have 5 children who have graduated from District 14. And I want to let you know that I'm going to kind of brag a little bit, because I kind of feel like the state is telling us that we do not have any students that have been successful in the last 10 years out of our high school, or current students that are not going to be successful. and I disagree with that. I've also taken on 9 of my great nieces and nephews, and I took them on in 2010. And I still have 4 left that are in the school district. I have 2 high schoolers, a middle schooler, and an elementary schooler. Let me tell you something about the kids that have graduated in the last 10 years. I've had 9 children graduate in the last 10 years through the time that they're telling us that we are in turnaround. I have 4 that have finished college degrees, caseworker, on to law school, teacher, and now an organizer. I have 3 students that are going to finish college in about 2 years. I have a sports person, someone graduating in sports, another teacher, history teacher, and I also one graduating as a journalist. I feel like all these children have come through District 14. My 2 high schoolers are performing at above average. They've been through the district since kindergarten. And right now they can test on the PSAT as well as anyone, anywhere in our state. And that is with District 14's education. I feel that our school, I know that our school district is having problems and that we need help and support. We need help reorganizing, but we also need help with the high school, not without the high school. It will separate families. It will separate our community. We need that high school. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm out of time. I have more to say, but I'm out of time. So I just want to brag about the kids that's coming from my family. It's going to take family. Kids have to be there. The high school has the education if kids just take advantage of it. And my children are proof. I have good children, and they are all going to do well in life. And they're all from Adams 14. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your comments. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, we thank you for your time this evening. We'll move on to Alexander Myers.
Alexander, you should be able to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Okay, hello, my name is Alexander Myers. I'm talking about the district, the same as my aunt. I've been in the district for a while, and yeah, there are some flaws with changing the administration every year, but there's a lot of programs that the school offers that the state doesn't get to see because it might not show on testing. Like me personally, and like 7 or 8 other people are getting internships at high-level restaurants through the school district, through programs that the school offers because we took advantage of it. And then there's plenty of kids who get certified in trade school to be like construction workers, plumbers, auto collision repair. They get those certifications through the school, and the state doesn't see that because it may not show on the test scores. But there's kids who are doing that and just may not get the best tests. And the school district needs help getting more stability in the administration instead of pressuring them into getting outside help and the outside help coming in and messing up the district. So by pressuring the district into getting outside help consistently, then it's causing teachers and students to feel like they never really know what's going on. So they need that. They need stability, not a change in administration every year. They need to let one person have more than 3 or 4, like 2 or 3 years to try to change the district, because it's going to take a lot longer than that. And closing the district is just going to cause most of the high school to just drop out because they don't have transportation. They may have to take care of their younger siblings because their parents can't or are unable to, or they're at work. They may not have, most kids may not even have rides because they either walk or ride the buses, so they would have no way to get there. And so it's going to cause a lot of students to just end up working out after middle school and never getting a high school degree if you shut down the high school if you shut down ACHS. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Councilmember Douglas?
Yes, thank you, Alexander, for coming forward. It's really nice to hear from someone who is actually experiencing the trials and tribulations that a lot of people people don't see. And I really appreciate you coming forward and speaking in behalf of the other students that you go to school with. So thank you so much for coming forward. It is so nice to see the youth actually engaged in coming forward. Thank you.
All right, seeing no other requests for questions, thank you, Mr. Myers, again for your time this evening. We'll move on to Jason Myers.
Jason, you should be able to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Yes. My name is Jason Myers. I am a 10th grade sophomore at Adams City High School. I think the closing of the high school is not a good idea. If you close the high school, that would put a bunch of teachers out of a job, and children might not be able to get to other high schools. Because like my brother said, most ride the bus or walk, and they might not have the transportation to get to other school districts. And if they have to take care of their children when their parents get off of work and they have to be at home at a certain time, and it takes a while to get to that school district, then their little siblings might be at home alone, which is a danger to them. Also, there's many opportunities that come from the high school. Like my brother said, we have classes like carpentry and culinary arts that give people opportunities to do other things. Like for carpentry, you could go right away into an internship after high school. Then you start off getting $16 an hour and you work through the internship. And my brother is in culinary arts, and he is having an internship at the Ritz-Carlton and is getting paid high money for that. So if you close the high school, then these kids don't get those opportunities to have better things in their future like that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for coming to speak to us tonight. I just want to be clear that the city doesn't hold the decision to keep a school open or closed. And so just keep that in mind as you're making your comments. Happy to hear the comments, and I'm glad to see the engagement of both parents, students, faculty, everybody who's here, but just wanted to make that point really quickly.
Seeing no other questions, we thank you again for your time. We'll move on to Dominic Hellbach.
Dominic, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can, yes, Dominic.
Okay, so I'm a proud graduate of Adams 14 School District. I graduated in 2019, and I've been watching the news. I've been keeping up while I've been off in college, and I've been seeing all this news about how the state school board thinks that Adams 14 is not producing success. And I would like to say I'm exactly the opposite of that. I'm 3 years deep into my college degree. I'm going to become a high school teacher for social studies. And the last 3 years I've been spending training so I could come home to Commerce City. And I want to come home and help the kids, help the students, help my family, help the families around me. And I understand that you guys cannot make a decision on the schools. And I know that like the decision isn't on our school, our city, but as Commerce City, as a whole, we need to fight to protect our students. Many of our students, their only access to education is the high school. And if we get rid of that high school, we will not have the ability, like many students will not have the ability to transport themselves around to different districts. And I'm asking you guys to, and when the time comes in the next few weeks, to fight for our kids, for Commerce City, not just for the districts, not just for those of us still like living in the town, but for our community, for our culture, for our people. And I'm asking you guys to fight the state board from shutting down our schools so that we could keep a strong tradition. Many of us feel like the state board is wanting to shut us down and kick us to different school districts, but we don't understand why. I have one friend who's an electric engineer. I have another friend who's a submarine mechanic. My brother's an elementary school teacher. I have one friend who just qualified for the D1 National Wrestling Tournament. We are thriving from this school. We could thrive from the school, and it's up to us as a city to stay together to keep ourselves thriving. If we just let them shut down our school, so many kids will miss out on sports, will miss out on college, will miss out on everything that all the rest of the nation experiences. So I'm just, in the next few weeks when it's time for us to fight, I'm asking you guys to have our backs. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Hellbach. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, we thank you for your time this evening. We'll move on to Maribel Castillo Tapia.
Maribel, if you're in the meeting, you can hit *9 on your phone or use the raise hand function in Zoom. Mayor Huseman, I do not see Maribel in the meeting.
Thank you. Next will be Renee Millard-Chacon.
Wrong Renee. Renee, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Hello, my name is Renee Millard-Chacon. I am a co-chair of the Equity Analysis Subcommittee of the Environmental Justice Action Task Force, EPHE. I am also executive director and co-founder of Women from the Mountain, an Indigenous women-led nonprofit that addresses environmental racism in Commerce City specifically. As a cultural educator, as an educator with a master's specifically in transformative education, it is crucial to keep our schools open and understand cumulative impacts from so many forms of particulate pollution that Commerce City needs to move within context of cultural sensitivity and trauma sensitivity, specifically to disproportionately impacted communities and Indigenous communities that do live in the Adams 12 and Adams 14 spaces. It is incredibly important for equity analysis to leave these schools open because not only do these kids, have they missed attendance or has it affected their test scores because of healthcare impacts, but that's not going to change by redistricting them and shipping them out other spaces. That's gonna still be a healthcare impact because have to come home to these spaces. And nothing changed if you do not support them as a council and transformative education and as school boards. We legitimately need to strengthen our education in Commerce City and build it towards sustainable and renewable industries. So trade schools, integrating more equity analysis for understanding the next sectors that are coming in to not be predatory in the same way, and to educate our youth and future generations for the known climate impacts, cumulative impacts, and honestly, impacts overall from industry and extractive industries they're going to have to face. And the least we can do is provide them education next to their homes. The least we can do is provide them education with their own cultural and trauma sensitivity, having survived healthcare impacts, having survived cumulative impacts. Even right now, my children are gifted and talented in Adams County and in Commerce City. They're 3 grade levels ahead. And they're right now, my oldest is studying STEM and engineering, understanding solar. My husband is a solar engineer. We live in these spaces, we love these spaces, and especially for Indigenous communities, it's incredibly important to be educated in these spaces to reclaim and rename a lot of erasure from our own homelands. So please keep this in mind to be good ancestors, that you do have the responsibility to restore and to no longer even let school boards or privatizing spaces come and harm our community through our education system. I do know a lot of community members that rely on these spaces, especially education at the least, for social intelligence and emotional intelligence. We should be strengthening our schools, not shutting them down. So I truly hope you do weigh independently cumulative impacts, disproportionately impacted communities, and what does it mean to transformally educate our communities from their self-determination and protecting their schools. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, we thank you for your time this evening. And last, we have Renee Lovato.
Renee, you should be able to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Thank you. The other Renee. Esteemed council members, Mayor Huseman, and city staff, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you this evening. I felt compelled to speak to the proposed resolution to support Adams 14 School District and the Adams 14 Board of Education. Thank you, Councilwoman Douglas, for bringing this important and timely resolution forward for consideration. I'm a proud third-generation lifelong Commerce City resident. My parents, aunts, and uncles are all proud Adams 14 graduates. My sisters and I and my son join the countless Commerce City friends and family members that are proud to say the same. I currently have the honor of serving as the Vice President of the Adams 14 School Board. The district has been all over the news lately. While I won't dare to dig into everything that has been said right now, I would like to share a couple of key points. The Colorado Department of Education and State Board have been pushing a narrative that this district lacks the leadership to improve the academic achievement and management of the district. I refute this narrative with every ounce of my soul. I believe the leadership capacity and experience of our superintendent and school board far exceed that of anything this community has ever had before. We have consistency and stability for the first time in a very long time. We have on numerous occasions acknowledged that we need help to turn this district around. However, given past experiences, we demand that we have the ability to hold any such external manager accountable. Staff is currently reviewing applications for a new external manager as we speak. I invite the community and you to participate in the interviews of the finalists next week. On a more positive note, I think we're finally moving in the right direction. We've accomplished more in the short amount of time that the district has been able to operate under its own authority than we have in over the 2.5 years we were under external management. We are working on a strategic plan, a talent management plan, a retention and recruitment plan, a plan for instructional transformation, and a plan to improve culture and climate and community engagement, all of which we paid MGT to do. I'm gonna skip because I'm running out of time. We need your help now more than ever. Our community is strong, resilient, and powerful. We need to come together to save our schools. Your approval of this resolution will send a strong statement of support to our community at a time that it needs it most. We want to continue working in collaboration with the city to develop the land and assets within our boundaries. We voted to sell the old Alsip property to infuse capital funding into our existing buildings and make much needed improvements to our schools. Every one of our students deserves to learn in a building like ALSA. Most recently, we approved a resolution to conduct a true needs assessment following the community school model for Central Elementary. Our high school has a true CTE program for the first time ever. Please don't let the state take any more from this community. Please stand with us as we embark on uncharted territory. Please approve this resolution so we can continue to contribute to a quality community for a lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lovato. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Councilmember Noble?
Ms. Lovato, when is this hearing and when is the deadline for a resolution or a letter or something?
Thank you, Councilwoman Noble, for the question. We are tentatively scheduled for the hearing on April 13th. It kind of depends on the agenda to be set to have that finalized. Public comment, including that for which you can make, is accepted by the state through April 8th. And we do have the information posted to submit that online or via written comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else on council have any questions? Seeing none, thank you again for your time this evening. We'll now move to our in-person audience who wishes to speak. We'll start with Maria Zubia.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mayor Huseman and elected board. I am here as a resident and also a proud member of the school board. I am the secretary for the Board of Education of Adams 14. I'm a longtime resident of Commerce City. I live off of 66th and Monaco, between that area, but I grew up in the Monaco area. I attended Monaco Elementary School, Adams City Middle, Kearney, and Adams City High School. As an alumni, I am very proud of my community, and I will tell you, in 2019, I lost my mom, as many of you know, and I wanted to actually apply for this position, and I asked her, like, what do you think? Is it a good time? She's like, it's never a good time, right? I'm like, no, it's never a good time. But for me, I wanted to make that difference that if, this was our last shot at making sure that the state understood what a diverse community we have and what a unique makeup of this community. The unique makeup is what makes it what it is. I mean, there's no way of explaining it. I don't know how you guys all explain it on the community, but it's a different makeup. And for the first time ever, when I was first appointed to this position, I was very optimistic about the fact that I was finally representing the kids that look like me, the kids that speak like me. Because I've never felt that that was fair for our children to be looked down upon because they're different, as opposed to accepting the fact that they are very, like I tell them now, they're gifted. Our bilingual kids are gifted because they know 2 languages. I know what it's like to grow up having to translate for your family. I've been doing it since I was 6. And the fact that our kids are still doing it to this day, and that I ask them, are you still translating? Are you still filling out those papers for your parents? They're like, yeah. I'm like, so how is it that a state official can say that you are not learning when you have taught yourself how to do what they taught you in school in English? You've been teaching yourself to do in Spanish, because I did that myself too. And so I'm here to ask that not just you, but our alumni out there, our kids, our parents, everybody, putting all differences aside and all the drama that happens, because Commerce City is full of drama, we know it, let's call it out. We have to put that aside, because right now, our schools are in jeopardy. Our high school is in jeopardy. And it's not just the high school, it's Central, and it's all the other schools that follow. And we don't want to lose any of our schools regardless. We just want to make sure that for future generations. We have our schools ready to go. And for the first time ever, we have a superintendent and we have a board that is willing to stand up for this community and for all our diverse kids. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, we thank you for your time this evening. Next up will be Dr. Luria.
Good evening, Mayor Huseman, council members, community members. My name is Dr. Carla Luria, Superintendent of Adams 14 School District, located at 5291 East 60th Street Avenue in Commerce City. I am here to strongly encourage you to consider passing the resolution to support Adams 14 School District and its Board of Education, composed of 5 members rightfully elected by the citizens of Commerce City. 3 of them were elected last November. A local Board of Education committed to improving students' educational outcomes and social and emotional well-being as we recover from the pandemic. The State Board of Education of Colorado has repeatedly and publicly said they will take action based on the recommendations of a state review panel that they commissioned, which, despite the district's request, did not mirror the demographics of our students and did not understand our community. For example, the panel designed a short 20-minute session with each Adams 14 Board of Education member, making it very difficult to engage in any in-depth discussion around the district. Moreover, the state review panel did not provide translation or interpretation services when meeting with our Spanish-speaking parents or students. As a result, our parents left prematurely their short meeting without having their voices heard. The State Board of Education will use this panel's recommendations to possibly take adverse actions against the district on April 13th or 14th of 2022. The process by which the State's Commission panel arrived at their judgment and advised to close 1 or more schools and to dissolve the district leadership and its rightfully elected Board of Education is flawed and unfair. It is wrong for the Commerce City community. Enough is enough. Our community deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, just like any other community in the nation. The Adams 14 School District and Commerce City community expects a fair process to allow us, the community, to find together the solutions to the challenges we face. We have a lot of work to do. And as the superintendent of Adams 14 School District, I am committed to bringing stakeholders together to transform academic outcomes for our students by expanding educational opportunities for our students, by ensuring student health, safety, and emotional well-being, by increasing organization efficiency, and by cultivating Adams 14 talent. Your support is not only pivotal, but very timely. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Luria. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, we thank you for your time this evening. We'll move on to Guillermo Serna.
Guillermo Serna, 14122 East 102nd Place, Commerce City, Colorado. What we're asking is for the state board to do its job. It's supposed to give solutions to districts throughout the state. Right now, they are almost demanding, without community input. I was there when they were talking about this 3 years ago. And they hired this company, or whatever they call it, to come up with solutions. Solutions of closing the school. when the forefathers of this city had community, local schools, neighborhood. They want to destroy that at a time when Commerce City is in a growth potential with its increase of properties. They want to close our school. Yes, there's problems, but the problems is not with the district. The problem is with the state board, the legislature, and including the governor. Because we are in Adams County, for God's sakes. Space, freight, technology. This is what we need to keep our kids interested in school, because it's coming, and our kids are not going to be prepared to be able to compete from the other states that are coming into the state of Colorado. Millions of people more will come, and there's going to be the poor that are going to suffer because of the lack of education. But the school board and the state, okay, have got to get together along with the city fathers. They are taking our money and spending it and then asking for more so they can do it another 2 or 3 years. No, that's the district's empowerment from the Constitution of Colorado to educate our children. We are here because of education, that some of the problems that we had along the war, along as we were building this nation. And it was education, okay, that made it grow the way we are and be the leadership of the world. But we have to educate our kids. Mr. Ford, he knows it. Everybody here has contact, either knew they moved in because of education possibilities, of the potential of the city and the county. So please, I will not beg, but face to the responsibility, please, to save the children. They don't have any representation other than you to maybe ask the state board to reconsider and ask the county to look at it also. That's all I have to say. I've been out, not because I want to, but because of certain situations that I have. But our kids have proven they are lawyers, they are doctors, and they're bus drivers, and they're this. But at the same time, they've been successful. And I ask you, back up the school board, because they need your help. I'm trying, but I just don't have enough time because of the situations at home. Thank you very much. If you've got any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Serna. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Councilmember Madera?
Not a question, but missing you at the council meetings, Mr. Serna, so glad that you're back.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate your time this evening.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Jean Claps.
Hello, City Council. I'm Gene Claps, and I am a candidate running for Adams County Sheriff this year. I would like to thank you for the opportunity last month that I had to sit in on a meeting with the Diversity and Inclusion Commission with Miss Allen Thomas and Trenton and the other board members, and Commerce City's progressive and proactive stance on creating a community that looks at diversity, equality, and inclusion. So I came here tonight to thank you for that. I would also, because of what I heard tonight, would also like to say, yes, you don't have a voice in the school board's decision, but you do have a voice to tell them what you think and your ideas and your plans, individually and as city council members. So thank you for that opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to come to the meeting last month. And I would encourage Commerce City residents to seek out that commission and be part of that, to be progressive in the city and to make change. So thank you.
Thanks, sir. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, we thank you for your time this evening. Good luck. Thank you all for speaking with us tonight. If follow-up is necessary, you should expect to be contacted by a staff member. Members of the public were also able to submit comments online and by mail. No written comments were received by the deadline. Actually, that is not true. We had one written comment regarding the traffic situation on US 85 between 104th and 120th Avenue. If anyone wishes to speak at a future council meeting, please check the meeting agenda and city website for information on how to register or submit written comments. Next up, we'll move on to presentations. We have a presentation on the Park Ranger update. We'll invite Lisa Nordholt, PRG Strategic Initiative Supervisor, to make the presentation.
Hello, Mayor and council members. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to update you on the Park Ranger program. For those of you who I have not yet met, my name is Lisa Nordholt. I'm the Strategic Initiative Supervisor for Parks, Recreation, and Golf. I'm gonna go ahead and share my presentation. This presentation gives a brief history, tasks completed to date, an overview of program goals, and the future of the Park Ranger program. I presented to council in July of 2021. At that time, we were in negotiations with Adams County regarding the IGA. We plan to have Adams County Open Space hire one park ranger who was to be dedicated to Commerce City Parks, Trails, and Open Spaces. Adams County would hire, train, supervise, and oversee that ranger. A priority was to update ordinances as needed, formalize parks, recreation, and golf rules and regulations, allowing them to be able to be enforced by the park ranger, and creating a citation system with a fee schedule. We also were setting up a hiring process for the ranger with Adams County Open Space. In fall 2021, the park ranger plans changed to include direction from council. We were able to adjust the IGA to reflect these changes. The park ranger program was to be expanded to 4 rangers. Adams County Open Space would hire 2 rangers to be dedicated to Commerce City Parks, Trails, and Open Spaces. Parks, Recreation, and Golf would hire 2 additional rangers. The plan included all 4 rangers to be hired at the same time and trained together. PRG staff and Adams County would develop a training program together. This change would allow Commerce City to grow a sustainable long-term park ranger program while maintaining an ongoing partnership with Adams County for training, enforcement, and other needs. Our current status, we have made quite a bit of headway. Working with Brian Swan in the city attorney's office, we now have an IGA in place and formal adoption of park property rules and regulations. We continue to work on updating ordinances as needed. All of the ordinances, rules, and regulations the park rangers are able to enforce are published on a new webpage. That link is listed here on this slide and in your packet. Working with Travis Bernstein, the Adams County Park Ranger Supervisor, we established a hiring process, and we currently have 4 rangers on staff receiving training from Adams County, AdCom, and various city departments, including police, public works, code enforcement, along with Rocky Mountain Arsenal National Wildlife Refuge Rangers.
Excuse me,
I'm
ma'am.
working with,
Ma'am, can I interrupt for 1 second? Mr. Gibson, can we
Yes.
get the slide presentation up so people can follow along?
is it not showing?
It's not.
Okay, sorry
There we
about
go.
that.
Thank you.
Let's try this again. Thank you. It's telling me that somebody else is sharing.
We've got it up for you now, Lisa.
Oh, got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Let's see, where was I? I am working with the Rangers to put together internal processes utilizing best practices from other Ranger programs throughout Colorado and the nation. We have a webpage set up introducing the program to the public, similar to information that is published in the summer recreation guide, introducing the park rangers, to the public. Similar information is published in the summer recreation guide that is also in your packet for that web link. You can go ahead and change slides. I would like to take a couple minutes to introduce you to our Rangers. They were unavailable to be here tonight, so I wanted to give you a brief bio for you. Rachel Holland comes to us from Boulder County Open Space, where she served as a park ranger. Prior to Boulder, she has worked in horticulture and in interpretive programs. Adele Rentiera served in the military and then went to Spain to teach English. Most recently, he worked for Colorado Parks and Wildlife as a ranger at Chatfield Reservoir. Adele and Rachel are Commerce City employees. Next slide, please. Matthew Bonanno has worked for Denver Parks and Recreation and Aurora Parks Recreation and Open Space, where he served as a ranger in both organizations. Richard Lamb is a retired police officer from Texas and was a part-time employee with Commerce City Police Department, running background checks for potential employees. Both of these are Adams County Rangers dedicated to serving Commerce City. Next slide. This next slide lists the park ranger goals as we currently see them. Being a new program for the city, they could change in the future. I'm not going to go ahead and read all of them, but basically it is really about educating our residents and park users about the trails and encouraging resource protection. Next slide. Future plans. So our plan is to finalize training and certifications for our Rangers by the end of May. All 4 will attend Ranger Excellence School, which is hosted by Larimer County in May. We hope to have full patrol to begin early summer. During the budget cycle for 2023, we will be submitting requests for the Park Ranger Supervisor position as discussed in the August 2021 budget retreat. The formation of this position allows us to bring the 2 Adams County Rangers over to Commerce City and will help to establish that sustainable park ranger program. We'll continue this partnership with Adams County as well, allowing for that joint training and emergency assistance that is so important. Next slide. Does the panel have any questions?
Thank you, ma'am, for the presentation, the update. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I think this is something that's much needed, but had a couple questions. Will the park ranger be responsible for overseeing the cleanup of the drug paraphernalia, such as the syringes, especially along the Sand Creek Trail and all the other trails?
We will work with Public Works and the Park Maintenance Division to make sure that that is happening. Ultimately, it is a park maintenance, but we will work with them to ensure that that is happening and make sure that communication is open and anything is identified as needing cleaned up as well.
Thank you. And then another question I didn't see in the presentation, what are their working schedules like? And will they be available on the weekends as well?
They will all be on 4 days, 10-hour shifts, which allows us to have 7-day-a-week coverage. It will not be from park opening to park closing, just due to 4 people cannot cover all of that. But we will have all 7 days covered with the majority of the daylight hours covered. Because they are limited commissioned rangers, they are not fully armed and with defensive equipment. So we have worked with the police department to ensure that those evening hours, when it is dark, that police department will work with us.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you again for the update this evening, ma'am. Look forward to seeing this program in operation.
Thank you.
Next up, we have noticed council business. First up, we have a request to support the Denver International Airport's Pena Boulevard grant application. This was a request that was sent to me last week, and the airport is looking for a grant for $14.8 million to fund the design and environmental components of the Pena Boulevard Transportation and Mobility Master Plan improvements. I believe last year we supported a similar raised grant application by them, and then shortly after putting in that support, found out that as a city, we were also putting in for a raised grant for 88th Avenue. I'm told this year we are also submitting a raised grant for 88th Avenue. So I am posing this question to council, whether or not you wish to support the Denver International Airport's grant application, or if you wish to solely rely on us submitting an application. Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I think we would have to oppose supporting it, not because of the position of the project, but I have a lot of experience in federal grants, and they do it regionally. And if you're competing within your own region, both are likely to lose, quite honestly. And so I think we should stick with ours on 88th.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurst. Any other opinions on the matter? Councilmember Grimes?
I would just support Councilmember Hurst's comments and agree we need to think about the city first in this instance.
Thank you. At this time, does anybody wish to make a Councilmember Noble?
I'm not picking up my colleagues' comments. If you could speak more directly into your microphones, these are directional microphones. They don't pick up if you're down or up or sideways. That would be helpful for me because of my hearing loss issues. Thank you. When I saw this come up, I was looking at our package and I saw both a grant, all the supporting material was for the Denver Pena Boulevard grant application, and yet the presentation was for 88th. And I don't know why we would be competing with ourselves. I would support the 88th widening grant for Commerce City.
Thank you. This time, does anybody on council wish to make a motion in order to have me sign the letter in support of Denver International Airport's raised grant application? Seeing none, we will move on. Next up, we have a discussion on a draft resolution to support Adams 14 School District at the Board of Education. We'll invite Councilmember Douglas to introduce the item and make a motion.
This is new to me, so I appreciate the opportunity that I have to bring this resolution forward. I have been involved with both school districts all of the time that I have been here in Commerce City, which is going on 20 years now. And I have seen the struggles that Adams 14 has faced with going through turnaround, which I never felt was necessary to begin with. However, I've seen a turnover in the administration several times, and I think that has added to the issues that they have faced. And I really feel like if we can come together as a community and show support for this district and for our students and our families, that we can show the state that we are not what they believe we are. And that one size does not fit all. We are a unique community. We are a special community. And because of that, I think they need to see us through a different lens. I have been to many of the state board meetings. I have seen heard condescending remarks regarding our community. I have seen them try to get rid of or take away our authority over ourselves several times, one of which they tried to charter the high school and take it away out of the district. And so I ask that we all come together as one. And yes, we don't have authority over the school district, but we sure can show our support for them. I wish the rest of you would have been as involved as I had been to see how things have unfolded over the years. And I feel like this district is being targeted. I feel like the community is being targeted. And I feel like it's time that we stand up for ourselves and show that we are united as one. And we show them that we are truly capable of taking care of ourselves, and we don't have to have someone else who does not know our community come in and try to tell us how to take care of ourselves. And that's why I'm asking for your support on this resolution. It was drafted by the attorney for the Adams 14th School District, and I ask for your support. And I don't know if that's what I was supposed to do, but that's what I did. So thank you.
Councilmember Noble?
Thank you very much. And I really do see a city council as having a bully pulpit. It may not be our authority, but it's certainly our role to take a stand on behalf of our community. We need to send a message that we have a value that values education for all of Commerce City. I am perplexed why this has even come forward at this time on the state level, why they're doing this when we have just come through 2 years of a pandemic. And if there's any part of Commerce City that had an important role to play on the front lines, it would be the parents who are living in South Commerce City while their children are also trying to get an education, while they're also trying to figure out the internet and how to do it at home and all that other kind of stuff. The timing is just amazing to me. We had the opportunity to meet Dr. Luria when she first came to Adams 14, and I was very impressed with what she was bringing to Commerce City, and impressed with meeting the school board as well. So, Councilmember Douglas, I would second your motion for approval of the resolution in support of, that's in our packet.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
What I would recommend is that we take this document as a starting point and prepare both a resolution and a letter to go to the State Board of Education for your approval on April 4, which would be prior to their deadline for submitting comments.
And if I may add, Mr. Mayor, this resolution has not been reviewed or vetted by the city attorney's office either.
Thank you. Councilmember Noble, you mentioned seconding a motion, but I did not hear a motion from Councilmember Douglas. Councilmember Douglas, do you have a motion to make?
I would like to make a motion to approve a revised resolution that includes a corrected date and a phrase regarding the closure of the high school for your approval tonight.
Councilmember Noble?
I would second that. If I could amend, though, I think the city manager and city attorney are suggesting that they might revise the resolution, and in which case we can bring it back for a vote on August 4th. Okay, April 4th. On April 4th, we don't want to miss that deadline, and then vote on it then. So we could do a motion now to move it to the April 4th agenda with the revisions from the city attorney and city manager.
I would accept that.
I have a motion and a second to direct the city attorney and working with the city manager's office to prepare a resolution and a letter to the State Board of Education for approval at the April 4th regularly scheduled city council meeting. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst?
Yeah, thank you. And first, I'd like to say I appreciate all of the community support that came out tonight because this is a very important issue. Not going to continue to repeat what everybody said. I thought there were some great points about transportation and some of the impacts of closing a high school. And I fully support that. And then Councilwoman Noble's point of we just came out of 2 years of the pandemic. You know, in terms of mental health, getting back to school and getting that interaction and those that ability to learn and some sense of normalcy, I think is incredibly important. And to do this at this time is going to be very detrimental to not just the kids, but the community as a whole. And I lived through that. My high school in California got taken over by the state, and we all kind of scattered and had to go to different schools. And it ended up working out fine for me, but it didn't for everybody. And I think this could have a very significant impact to kids' life, not just the kids in today's high school, but the ones that are coming to Adams 14 in the near future. So yeah, I fully support the district, and quite honestly, I would love if someone could send me an invite to the meetings because I'll be there. Because I think that phase of your life is so critical for your adulthood and being successful as an adult. And so I absolutely support this. Obviously, we'll go through the process to make sure that we do the review and get our own document to the state board, but I absolutely think that it's a must that the community comes together to support Adams 14.
Councilmember Madera?
Yeah, I agree. I won't repeat everything over again, but at the end of the day, we're one community, and you can't have a community without schools. Education is the great equalizer, and maybe I'm biased because I'm a product of Adams 14, from elementary school all the way through high school, and I couldn't accomplish anything that I've done without education and the opportunities that I was given. And I just feel like we have a board that is dedicated more than ever. Everyone that joined that school board joined it when they knew the times were going to be tough, that they were going to have their work cut out for them to pull this school district back up to its glory. And it just goes back to having that stability. We haven't had stability in the administration for years now, probably going back to when I was in school there almost 20 years ago. And it's it's a problem with anything. It's like a football program that changes head coaches every 2 years. The program's never going to be successful until they have the stability, they're able to get the staff in to implement their programs and their culture. And, you know, the state board's really doing a disservice by, you know, robbing the school district of that opportunity. And that's why I think, you know, we need to stand with our school district and do what we can. While we can't control it directly, you know, we can make our voices heard and make our citizens' voices heard. And I think we heard those tonight.
Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. I can't say that I agree or disagree because I'm looking at a report put out by the Department of Education with lots of things to not only suggest but definitively say that the district's not prepared to continue operating the high school. And so I was just curious if there's a way that we can get a response from the district, maybe from Dr. Luria, because the only evidence-based document I'm looking at is from the Department of Education, and with what it says, I couldn't support this kind of ask from Councilmember Douglas, but I would like to hear the other side of that. Is that possible to have a response at this point?
Members of the board, Councilmember Grimes. Yes, my name is Carla Luria, Superintendent of Highlands 14 for the record. And actually that report that you are speaking about, we have a letter in response to that report. This report that you're referring to is actually the report that was developed by the State Review Panel. And I spoke a little bit about some of the experiences that we had, unfortunate experiences that we had from the State Review Panel, including meetings that were only short, 20 minutes long, no translation or interpretation services offered to our parents, although they stated they wanted to hear from our parents, and that did not happen. They simply responded that they do not provide translation services. And other flaws in the process that we feel are extremely important and have led to this report being so tinted against the district. There is a letter that we responded. It's a long letter, so if I may ask Chair Huseman, I will provide a copy of that letter to all of you through the means that you direct me to, so that before April 4th, you have an explanation of every single one of them. I am also available to bring additional information to the April 4th. So I'll come and make sure that I respond to any other questions that you have.
And as a board, Maria Zubia, Board Secretary of Adams 14 School Board. I actually went through this weekend, and I went through every meeting, and you can find it on board docs on CDE. And I, on my personal computer and my personal printer, printed off all of the materials that we have sent that have a lot of information as to, our evidence. The part that was never really heard whenever things were happening, but was shared, and it's public information. All of these are off of that website. And what you will find also is that, February 4th, that Friday, is when we got that email that said that our authority had been temporarily reinstated because the lead agency partner was going to be leaving on like the 11th. I had my meeting with the State Review Panel on the 11th. So I don't understand what they were reviewing if neither our superintendent or the board had a authority really until the 11th. I met with them in the morning for like 20 minutes at the most. They gave us each, I think, 20 to 30 minutes to meet with them. So for me, that timing is quite interesting because if on the Friday before they came is when we were first notified, oh yeah, you have the temporary authority. And then when they came, they were supposedly looking at our leadership. It just opens up a lot of questions for me personally as well as to how is it that you can judge somebody. It's, you know, if you hire someone, you're not going to say, okay, after, 2 days, I'm going to evaluate you for the whole past 2 years if you were just given that authority back. But all of that information is on that other letter that Dr. Luria was referring to that we hope to get you guys all a copy of.
Thank you for the responses. That would be really helpful.
Yes, and if I may add one last thing, Chair Huseman, may I? Carla Luria for the record, Superintendent of Adams 14. During those meetings that happened, and Director Zubia is absolutely right, it was 2 workdays after the authority and power was restored to the district. We offered, and I personally offered, evidence and materials that would help the panel review a broad piece of evidence, but they refused to take it. They actually said that they had all the information they needed and they would not take a binder actually that I prepared for them. So the things that are in that report, many of those things just omit the other side of the story. So I appreciate you asking for that because it's certainly important for you and everyone in the community to hear the other side. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Ford.
Thank you, Mayor. I also was a graduate of the district, went to Central Elementary, Kearney Middle School, and graduated from Adams City High School. Most important for me is that the children within our community and our school district get a good education. Not just an education, but a good education. And for many, many years, I have watched the ups and downs with the district. It has been, turmoil after turmoil after turmoil. And I want the best that we can give to the children of this community for an education. That's what's most important. I'm torn because I want to make sure that they get that education. We have a state board that's supposed to be doing their part in ensuring that education. I don't know if that's happening or not. I have a lot of pride in Adams City and in the district because that's where I went to school. So I know I have dealt with many boards previous that continued to have problems. And so I have a lot of faith in the people that are on the board today. I want to see them be able to get the district where it needs to be with your help as a superintendent to be able to move this community forward and have a positive education for the families that live here. That's really important to me. I was put in a position where I had to take 3 of my children out of Adams 14 school district when they were in elementary school. I let my oldest son graduate from Adams City because he was older and had all of his friends. I don't want other residents, families to be put in that same position. I want them to be able to be ensured their kids will get a good education. And so I'm going to be supportive of this district, and I'll support the resolution, but I think it's important that I say, I'm putting it in your hands to fix it once and for all, because over the last 20 years, it has had its problems. And so to the current board and the current administration, I'm tasking you with, if you're here to ask us to support you to have this in your hands, I'm gonna hold you to the task, but I will support the resolution.
Councilmember Douglas.
Yes, I just had a request that you allow the district's attorney, the school district's attorney, to work with you on coming up with the revisions to the resolution and to the letter, if that would be possible. I think there needs to be that kind of input, and you need to have that collaboration. So I would ask that, if at all possible.
Yes, ma'am. I was talking to Dr. Luria just a few minutes ago when the previous presentation was being made. It's my intention to work closely with her to incorporate information and whatever data that they can provide us. In terms of dealing with the school board's attorney, I would have to defer to our attorney, since attorneys talk to attorneys.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to direct the city manager's office in coordination with the city attorney to prepare a resolution and letter in support of the Adams 14 School District to be voted on at the April 4th meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. We'll vote on that on April 4th. Next up, we have the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes items that are routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, and non-controversial. They are presented to council for a single motion and vote. Any member of council may ask to remove a specific item for further discussion and a separate vote. Tonight, there are 4 items listed under the consent agenda. Does anyone on council wish to remove an item off the consent agenda for further discussion? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Councilmember Madera.
So moved.
Councilmember Hurst.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Mr. Gibson, will you please read the titles and take a roll call vote?
Minutes of the March 7th, 2022 regular meeting, minutes of the March 14th, 2022 special meeting, Resolution 2022-27, a resolution supporting the grant application for a stewardship impact grant from the State Board of the Great Outdoors Colorado Trust Fund and the completion of the Empowering Community-Led Stewardship Project. Resolution 2022-32, a resolution amending and correcting the named entity in resolution number 2021-81 to identify Triangle Logistics Center Commercial Metropolitan District as a proper party. Your vote should be open. Councilmember Noble.
And the consent agenda passes unanimously 9-0. We'll now move on to ordinances on first reading. First up is ordinance 2368, amending code to define park ranger as a peace officer and establish authority. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff? Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. Just curious what authority that gives them specifically. What I want to make sure we're not doing is putting them in a position to act like a police officer if they encounter, a homeless encampment or a domestic dispute or, all the things they might come across in their day. I don't feel like that's the appropriate position to be handling those types of situations.
So in the packet, and I'm going to pull it up real quick here, we have obviously the language of what's being, what we're asking you to change with regard to the code. And really, in a lot of ways, this is a housekeeping ordinance, amendment to the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code, because we previously modified the code to allow the park rangers to have authority that were being contracted through Adams County. But once we made this an in-house program as well, expanded it to be in-house, we didn't have a definition of a park ranger or that delegation of authority there. So in this, what we're doing here is we're basically saying they're given the authority to enforce municipal ordinances in the municipal code and other administratively adopted rules and regulations, including permit conditions on park property. So so we're talking about municipal ordinances. So just like police officers, who are a different form of peace officer, these individuals do have that authority to issue notices of citation or notices of violation or some other citation with regard to municipal code violations.
Will our park rangers be armed like a police officer?
I do not believe so, but I do not know what the scope or capacity is of what the vision is for those positions or what the training is that they're currently doing. I think that Lisa Nordholt, if she's still available, could probably speak to that.
Actually,
So could Caroline, I'm
Matt,
sure.
this is Carolyn Keith. I can answer that. Park rangers do not carry firearms. They have some protective gear such as, like, I don't know if it's actually a pepper spray and a billy club, but minimal. They do not carry firearms like police officers. It's also my understanding, the intent of this ordinance is everything that City Attorney Hayter has mentioned, but it was really to give positions. Not just park rangers, I believe it also included code enforcement to allow for them to enforce, as he said, municipal ordinances that would apply to their specific job duties.
So our code enforcement officers already have that authority, so there's nothing in this that actually changes the municipal code, code enforcement officer's job description or authority.
I just personally feel like those two jobs are quite a bit different. Code enforcement wouldn't necessarily be interacting with people directly, right? You might just receive a ticket for something. And correct me if I'm wrong, I've never shadowed a code enforcement officer, so I don't know exactly. But it just seems different to me. A park ranger could come across a number of situations that I personally feel like could put them in harm's way if they're asked to enforce certain ordinances.
So Councilmember Grimes, that's the purpose of their training. They wouldn't act alone if they felt they were in a position that threatens their, their person. I think as Lisa mentioned in the presentation, our first intent with our park rangers is to educate and to hopefully help people understand what the rules are and comply. But we do have a whole list of, ordinances apply to use of our parks. And the intent of park rangers first would be education. Second would be maybe warning if folks weren't complying with park rules and regulations. And then thirdly would be to issue citations.
Thank you, I appreciate the feedback. I maintain my position. I'm really not in favor of continuing to decriminalize certain pieces of our code. I feel like it puts our employees in a weird position where I feel like our police officers should be the ones doing this kind of work. And if we need more police officers, as you all know, I'm extremely supportive of anything our PD needs. I think that's where this should start, not with our park rangers having to enforce things that our police would normally handle.
Councilmember Madera?
So just to clarify, this is basically given the authority, similar to other park rangers in other, like City Park or Wash Park, where, if someone has an open flame, on a barbecue grill or something that's not authorized, they can, go give them a warning and ask them to put it out or, give a citation if needed.
That's my understanding, yes. And to respond to Councilmember Grimes as well, part of the purpose is to free up police officers for, what I would call true police officer work, rather than, having them respond to situations in parks. Although, if a situation escalated, they still would need to respond because they have certain authority and training that certainly a park ranger would not have. But also code enforcement officers have a fair amount of interaction with the public. They'll often talk to people, about a complaint or a situation that they have in their yard or something of that nature. So, quite a number of our employees do interact with the public and are trained to do so. So I think this is a beneficial program, not only to our residents, but also to our police officers, because it allows a non-sworn officer to basically respond to situations that don't warrant a police officer's attention.
So this is pretty common for most park rangers, right? No,
Yes, sir.
okay, because I think, how I interpreted it was giving them the right to write a citation is basically what this is enabling them to do if they need to. But obviously, the intent would be for them to educate, let people know that maybe what they're doing is in violation of the park rules, and, to try to curb that behavior before it ever got to that point.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Douglas?
Thank you. I really like the title peace officer. I think that's great. And wouldn't they be able to call on backup from the police department if they thought that they were facing a situation that could turn volatile, and wouldn't that be accessible to them?
I'm sorry, I
That's all
had an
right.
interruption.
That's all right, not a problem. Shame on you, man. No.
Could you repeat?
Yes. So if they came upon a situation that they thought was going to could possibly turn volatile, couldn't they call police backup to support them?
Yes, and again, that's the intent. The police chief is here and certainly can address this further than I can.
All right, thank you.
Oh, it's on. Good evening, council. To answer a couple of the concerns that I've heard, we've been in collaboration with PRG in this program from the inception. Quite frankly, this is a good direction for us to move in. To dedicate someone to actively work on our trails and parks is a good idea. Their primary function will be to reinforce rules and regulations and violations that occur in the parks, as well as any ordinance violations. And so I would look at them as a force multiplier as opposed to being taking away from the authority of police officers. As most of you know, we are understaffed and we've got 100 problems and this many resources. And so when we take a look at our priority of work, it will always be towards the safety of our community. Oftentimes what that means is our parks and trails end up getting less attention from the police department because we simply don't have the manpower nor the resources to adequately address those areas. And so we are very involved with this program. We're going to be involved with their training. 2 weeks ago, I authorized them to have a radio channel on our radio system. So we'll be in constant communication with them. So should something drastic occur in which they need assistance. And so we're looking forward to working with this program. And if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Thank you, Chief Nichols. Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for stepping in to answer a few questions. And I always defer to your expertise. You're the one that knows how this works and what we need. I just continue to have reservations about, escalating situations where people are, our park rangers will be unarmed, and when things get out of hand, they can get out of hand quickly, as you know. And, a phone call away is not always fast enough, and it just seems an inopportune position to put them in, should a situation arise where they need backup, and they're not able to defend themselves.
There we go. I concede your point that you are correct. When things go bad, they usually turn bad very quickly. Part of their training will be in identifying those things in which they make a judgment call on whether or not they decide to intervene, or if it is something that they should truly be calling us for. It is one of the things that we'll be evaluating throughout their training. Our officers will be working with them in the field, so we'll have a fairly good professional working relationship with them, and we'll try to minimize that. I will also tell you that your concerns aren't just related to park rangers. Police officers have the same sort of volition that we need to deal with, and we train through it as best we can. Having said that, there's no guarantee that bad things won't happen, but we'll do everything we can to mitigate that through their training, through the documentation, the information that we give them on a day-to-day basis when they're out patrolling. And so we'll be sharing resources with them, sharing information. They'll be working with our field sergeants on a daily basis. So it isn't like they're going to be out on an island by themselves. They'll be working with us fairly frequently. In addition to that, when they go out on something at a park, it'll be broadcast on our patrol channel. So our folks will have a general idea of where they are. And it is quite common for us, as we do with community development, when they're out at a location, we swing by and check on them periodically, and getting to know them over the radio system, you kind of get that, I don't know how best to describe it, but you hear something in their voice that says they're uncomfortable, and our folks will step up and do the right thing. And so I'm pretty comfortable with the program.
Thanks, Chief. I appreciate it.
Seeing no other questions for staff, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2368. Councilmember Davis.
Chief, before you leave. Yes, sir. I've got one more question for you, please. I know we've already discussed they wouldn't, if this was to be passed, they wouldn't be carrying firearms. Understand that. They, I would presume, have some sort of defensive modus operandi. I don't want to use the term weaponry, although I guess it could be argued if you got maced, that might be considered a weapon. But I would sure as heck hate to have them have those sorts of responsibilities with no means of protecting themselves. Has that been discussed?
You know, yes, it has, sir. That's been probably one of the first obstacles that we had to deal with, whether to have them armed or unarmed. We erred on the side of caution. There's also a variety of requirements that if you're going to arm them and give them police powers, now you have post-peace officer standards and training things that you have to deal with. There's a lot more that goes into it the minute you put a gun and call someone a peace officer. And so due to that and the liability that the city would be exposed to, because keep in mind, these are, correct me if I'm wrong, these are Adams County employees that are assisting the city and so there was a lot of concern with someone making a bad decision in our city. And for them to be post-certified in the city, that would require the authority of me and the city manager to address.
So just to clarify the chief's comment there, so we already have rangers through Adams County, and then this allows us to have direct hires to be park rangers that are direct employees of the city, not through the IGA with Adams County. So it's an expansion of that previous program.
So we would have been expanding those employees outside of the current Adams County program, and that would have been problematic. So some thought did go into it. We erred on the side of being cautious and being systematic in our approach to make sure that the program maintained consistency in both Adams County as well as in Commerce City.
Okay. I'm not advocating that they would necessarily need to carry a firearm. I'm not advocating that at all. Although some of our discussions a couple of weeks ago, some of the adventures I've had in life with no form of self-protection, I would be rather reluctant to, only in that respect, but I think you've answered the question for me effectively, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2368 as stated.
Councilmember Madera.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2368. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Noble.
Thank you very much. I didn't want this to just sit there, but it was stated a few moments ago that about the police department being understaffed, and sometimes the news about what the city council does doesn't make it out to the general public. In our budget hearings last fall, we not only approved the Commerce City Police Department's budget, but we unanimously added another $1 million. So I just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
Councilmember Madera.
Yeah, first of all, I want to commend the city on the the job that they've done with this program. I've already started seeing rangers out in the parks and the trails, and, you really start to notice the difference, almost immediately. And one of the complaints that we've always gotten was, people feared going out to the trails or going to the park because of, some of the encounters that they may have. And this really goes a long way to providing that security and just having, a set of eyes that, if it was just left to the police, they might not be there. And this provides a presence that is going to really, like the chief said, be a force multiplier to the security of our parks and to, really being able to have people enjoy those parks and trails. So I'm in full support.
Being no other requests for discussion, Mr. Gibson, will you please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2368, an ordinance amending Section 1-3006 of the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code to correct the section name, define park ranger as peace officer, and establish the authority of park rangers to enforce ordinance and rule violations relating to the use of Commerce City Park property. Your vote is now open.
Motion carries unanimously, 9-0. We'll now move on to ordinance 2371, amending the 2022 budget for Land Development Code Update Project. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I reviewed the presentation that's attached to this ordinance and just had a question. I'm not sure how if this would be the way to handle it, but it's been a while since it's been reviewed, so would a motion have to be made to have it reevaluated at least every 5 years? Because if in September of next year, it'll be 13 years, so how could that be added to, instead of waiting so long like it currently is, would we have to make a motion to have it reviewed more frequently?
I would suggest to you that at least initially, it ought to be evaluated every 6 months, if not every quarter, to see how it's working and bring you things to update. But then there ought to be at least an annual evaluation if we're doing it right. That, we look at the metrics, we see if we're getting what we want, we see if we're having problems, and we bring things to you. But initially, I would want to do it much more often. Just my experience in doing these is you're not going to catch everything on the front end. And you realize you've got an issue, don't need to let it wait 13 years.
Because, I know you're pretty new to the city, but do we know why it took so long? And, this might be a direction for Matt. How can we ensure that something is in writing? Because why did it take so long?
I'm sorry, you asked me why what took so long?
No, I'm directing to the city staff. Why has it been, like, if September of next year, it'll have been 13 years since this, in the presentation, since it has been reevaluated. So why did it take so long? I'm just saying why is it taking so long?
I wish I could answer that, but I've only been here since November, so I'm not sure. But I mean, it obviously needs to be done.
Just toss it. So I'm going to make an attempt to answer your question, Mayor Pro Tem. Part of it comes down to development trends, part of it comes down to timing, and quite frankly, it also comes down to, are the rules and regulations we have in place antiquated, outmoded, and ineffective? And quite frankly, with a lot of what we're seeing with respect to our development trends and the applicability of our regulations, the need for interpretations, from a staff judgment, and quite frankly as well through the conversations held with council and our community, it seemed it was the most apropos time for us really to get underneath the hood and make changes. We make small changes, but those changes don't substantively move the needle and effectively ensuring that we're getting the quality of the development and the timely development necessary as we continue to grow. There's not necessarily a timeline in which that should occur. Some communities turn it over every 5 years, some turn it over every 10 years, some don't. at all. It just depended upon what your growth model is. We have a pro-growth model here in the city based on our comp plan. So with respect to that, and with where our comp plan is also going, we should be making our land development code to respond to where that aspirational, that visionary, that advising document, because this land development code is the power to enforce that. So you don't want to half bake a cake per se, without bringing the other part of it along in the process. So, like I said, timing was apropos.
Because the city staff just stated even as often as 6 months. So it's just alarming to me that September of next year, when it says it's going to be, I guess, brought up again, that will be 13 years. So I support the ordinance, but can something, like I said, maybe this is a question for Matt, can it be added at least 5 years? We're not talking about baking cakes either, but I think it should be added something in there more sooner than 13 years, at least, 5 to 6 years, because this is, we're talking about the budget. So Matt, can that be added in the ordinance, or?
Am I understanding you correctly that you want to basically find a way to do additional amendments every 5 years? Is that?
Well, I just think it's too long. Like I said, that it's saying that in that presentation, it was saying that the last time that it was done was, and in September of next year, it'll be 13 years. So I'm just curious why it takes so long, that things are, so many things can get looked over in those 13 years.
I would just say that what this ordinance is providing for is a complete overhaul versus incremental amendments that would happen on a more often basis during the, you might expect to see during an interim basis. But I think Mr. Rogers would like to address this further.
What may be appropriate, ma'am, is that as we're going out to RFP, we can ask the successful respondent to look at a provision within the land development code that has a more timely review, and that is captured within the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Hurst?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Mayor Pro Tem that maybe we should just write some, I don't think we can require a budget in the future, or I don't know that I would want to, but I think every 3 years, we should probably be looking at this a little bit more in depth. That way, we don't have to do full overhauls. This is pretty costly, but that's to be expected when it goes so long. I think if we could get a handle on this where you're doing, obviously, Jim's job is to help us along as we go, and we're going to kind of make these changes as they're necessary. But I think a 3-year dive is probably realistic when we're in a growth phase like this. Maybe it's 5-year when you slow down a little bit. But in that review, obviously at 18 months, you can make a significant change if it's needed. But I think it just allows for more. And I think it allows it to be a cheaper contract. It allows us to have some flexibility where we're not having the same set of eyes on it every single time. We can go to either an on-call contract or an RFP process that allows a more, a third-party outside set of eyes as well, take a look at it, to keep track with, look at all the bills that are being passed. It's really tough to keep track with everything that's going on, as well as kind of land development code and everything else. And so I don't necessarily think it fits in this exact ordinance, but if we can work towards that on making that part of the bigger plan with the land development code, I would be supportive of that.
I think the beauty to that, sir, is, to your point, we can get as creative as necessary when thinking about I'll call it the overhaul of the land development code, major or minor. And what not to lose sight of as well is that with the comp plan, you can provide reinforcing language within various policies and standards within that document that could help guide and, like I said, reinforce the the review of the land development code on a more consistent basis. So you have a number of different avenues and be able to approach this matter.
Councilmember Noble?
I'm also concerned about the pace at which development has been occurring. And with an 18-month window, so much can happen that isn't what residents are hoping will occur in Commerce City. We lack proportionality. There are decisions made that I find perplexing at best, whether it's duplexes that are built facing 96th, who only have a driveway behind them that's 7 feet deep and no door to get in, and they're now told there's no way to park on the street and there's no way to accept deliveries. That was part, apparently, of our LDC to be able to allow that. Whatever we do moving forward, it can't preclude us from making these minor changes that are required. You and I, Mr. Tolbert, were in contact last week because of my question about notification signs on property. The notification sign discussion had occurred 3 months ago, and still the notification signs were the small ones that aren't legible and you're definitely not going to see as you're driving by. And I asked if we needed to make, that we needed to vote on it in some fashion because it was a change to the LDC, and you indicated that wasn't necessary, that you were going to put out a memo to make the change. So I think that there are things that we can be doing and should be doing, even if we are in parallel with this update as it's going on, because otherwise I'm going to suggest that we have a pause, because there are too many things that are occurring that shouldn't be happening, and it's out of balance, particularly in Ward 4 right now. We hear about it too much. We get regular emails about it. People are paying attention, as well they should. Civic engagement is paramount to me, and I'm thrilled when I see it. I'm thrilled at the number of people we had tonight speaking on various issues. And the same thing should be happening about land development, because there's nothing more important in some ways to a community than how the community develops. And we have so many things that we need to be paying attention to at this point. And in particular, it has to be what's happening with this land development code. Is this going to be let for bid or for an RFP? Has that been accomplished yet?
It will be through an RFP. That will be ready to be released, I hope, by the end of the week. It's in draft form. I've got to make a few corrections and give it to Mr. Hayter's folks to do one more quick look over, and then we'll be able to get that on the street. Just to address several of the issues you raised, it's my hope, and we've been working towards it, to try to get our process improvements that don't require council action that I've talked with you about before, implemented April 1st, where we start requiring the bigger signs. We've been trying to work to find the sign companies, get the information, know who can build them, and get all that straight. We also, if you recall, are doing some changes, because we realize some things can't wait the amount of time this is going to take. So we're going, within the next 60 to 90 days, I hope, we'll bring you back some improvements to the PUD process that will affect any new PUD or any amendment to a PUD going forward. And I think those will be things that will help get some control and better help plan some of the developments that we have, and give council an opportunity to be involved early on instead of at the final posting period on some of them that, right now because of where they are, you don't find out about them until they're ready to be constructed, basically, when they're posted. So, we're writing the RFP where there are provisions for, if we have something that comes up, we can ask for early submittals so we don't have to wait the full time to get the full document, that the consultant can help work with us and get some things addressed if they come up early on. So we're trying to look at all those things, because we realize it's a lengthy process, and with the pace of development here, we could have thousands more homes approved before we get the new code done.
And that's the problem. That's the issue. is that we can't let that happen without the changes to the LDC. And if we wait 18 months, you know how many are in the pipeline already, and that many more can be in the pipeline as well. And there'll be no opportunity for us to make a dent on any of this, and that will be a real tragedy. So I'm asking for a way to move up the deadline, just as Mayor Pro Tem Alan Thomas suggested. How do we move it up? How do we move up getting this accomplished? Is it telling them that for the 500,000, they need to have it accomplished by blank date? Because it's important to have these dates fixed.
I mean, we will have a date of completion, but I can tell you from experience, it's going to take 12 to 14 months to do it the right way and have engagement with the community that we need. It's not a, you know, if we hired somebody to go sit in a room and write it, they could get that done probably in 90 days, but we've got to have process and conversation. But we also recognize there are things that we can do right now. I mean, we've got, you know, a report that should be ready to go to Planning Commission in the next 60 days and to you in the next 90 days that will recommend, you know, ordinance changes in the LDC that will help with some of the immediate problems, the definition of mixed use, the park size, the way we process PUDs. All those things we're working on getting before you right now, not waiting until the LDC is done, but doing those immediately. And, you know, unfortunately, immediately, because we have to go to the Planning Commission, we can, you know, and study sessions with you, it immediately takes a little bit, but we're almost ready to start moving those through the process.
Would that include, let's say in a PUD, it shows a park, et cetera, would the change to the PUD require that to be never used for anything else but a park, for example?
The way we're going to write it, that's the intent, unless it's brought back here and this body changes it, you know, which is always somebody's right to ask for it. But they couldn't make a decision like has been done and say, well, you know, we'll change that park to something else.
So 90 days from here would be June?
That sounds right.
June, okay. And I also see that it's coming from the unencumbered fund balance in the general fund to the Capital Improvements and Preservation Plan Fund, which is the SIP. So there's an unencumbered fund balance in the SIP. Mr. Tinklenberg, how much is in that unencumbered fund balance in the SIP?
I don't recall offhand how much is in the, well, let me back up. In the city's general fund, you recently received a report from the Director of Finance, and as I recall, that's in the neighborhood of 66 million, something like that. Mm-hmm. In the capital improvement program, there is money that is encumbered for different projects, but within one of the projects, namely the 2K overall project, if you will. Again, we have different projects within the CIPP, and the 2K has sub-projects under it, and we've been closing out 2K projects over the years as those were completed. And we have a little over $4 million that currently sits in the 2K project fund that is not encumbered at this point. So that's again for parks, recreation, and roadway projects.
So I could make a motion then to transfer 500,000 from the unencumbered fund balance in the general fund to the SIP, and I could add $2 million for the Buffalo Highlands Park from the unencumbered fund balance in the general fund.
You could.
To the motion.
Yes, you could.
Okay, I will do that.
Well, Mr. Rogers and I had a discussion about that just a few minutes ago. Mm-hmm. And number one, we don't know what exactly is desired at the I'll call it Second Creek, 96th Avenue area. At a recent meeting, you had talked about creating an oasis. What I would suggest is that we do transfer some money to that for some community outreach and preliminary design, because we don't know if $2 million is too much or not enough, at this point, until we have more information. So that would be my suggestion to you, but certainly you could, make a motion of that nature.
Well, if I made it for $2 million, it could always be adjusted by amendment at a future city council date as well.
That is true.
And it could include the community outreach and that you're talking about.
That is true, yes, ma'am.
All right, okay, great. Then I will make a motion to approve. I'll make a motion to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2371 and include $2 million from the unencumbered fund balance in the general fund for a Buffalo Highlands project.
So at this point, the form of that motion is going to be improper because we're looking at a single subject rule for our motion. So that would have to be made in the context of a separate motion entirely, as opposed to something to add on to this one, because creating that other park is a different topic than appropriating funds for the purposes of a LDC update.
Even if I'm using the same unencumbered fund balance of the general fund, isn't that same topic?
No, it's a different topic. It'd have to be a different motion or different ordinance to do that. And because it's appropriation of funds, it should be by an ordinance.
Can I make that tonight?
If you'd like to take a recess, I can draft something for you to do that, yes?
Okay. That would be good. And should I make it during this section or doing administrative council business?
I didn't quite understand the last question.
Pardon me?
I didn't understand your last question.
Oh, may I make the second motion regarding Buffalo Highlands now or during administrative council business?
Well, since it's not on the agenda now, it sounds like administrative council business would be a better time to do that. But again, I'm going to need time to prepare an ordinance that you desire. And since it hasn't been put on the agenda and we haven't had public notice about that, I'm also concerned about just whether that's even going to be lawful at this time, because we could put it as an emergency ordinance, but then you would require 7. But otherwise, you would need to have proper notice of that to be on the agenda. So we're looking at a potential open meetings issue there as well.
Okay, how can I accomplish what I'm trying to achieve?
Well, I think you can direct staff to put this on the agenda for the next meeting. Would probably be the best way to do it.
Okay. I'll do that during administrative council business. All right, where was I? A motion to introduce by council is seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2371.
I have a motion to introduce by council is seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2371. Is there a second? Councilmember Hurst?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2371. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst?
Hand was still up, sorry.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I still feel like my question, though, wasn't addressed, because can that be, the motion be amended to add every 3 to 5 years or not?
I would say, ma'am, given that this is just looking at a budget appropriation, this is not in with respect to the adoption of a new land development code and the standards and the regulations that would guide its ongoing continuing review. You have opportunities to influence through comp plan or through the actual land development code itself, but I would say it's not appropriate with the ordinance that you have before you tonight.
So it can't be added then, you're saying at all?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Is that correct, Matt?
I would agree with that it would be inappropriate to put that on tonight.
So then how do we follow up and make sure as a city council that this doesn't go on another 13 years?
So, ma'am, if I may speak, the Land Development Code will require City Council to approve it. So in the Land Development Code, like I said, you can take that effort of outlining the review process, the sunsetting of the Land Development Code, as you all see fit. Similarly, you can also look at providing language within the comp plan that will also have to be adopted by City Council, which can also speak directly to the review period of the Land Development Code, which you all should be seeing sometime this year, in being able to have that as a precursor.
Okay. Thanks.
Councilmember Madera?
Yeah, I'm glad we're finally getting around to this. It's definitely long overdue, and I appreciate the director looking at some of the more urgent needs in the land development code and bringing those back to us, in a shorter time frame. So I'm looking forward to seeing those come back to us as well.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2371. Will the clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2371, an ordinance amending the 2022 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by transferring $500,000 for the unencumbered fund balance in the general fund to the Capital Improvement Preservation Plan Fund, CIPP, for costs associated with the Land Development Code LDC update project and authorization of the expenditure thereof. Your vote is open.
Motion carries unanimously, 9-0. We'll take a 5-minute recess. Convene. Next up on the agenda is ordinance 2380, an emergency ordinance amending code to prohibit use of ATVs on park property. We'll invite Matt Hayter, interim city attorney, to introduce the item.
Good evening. This item was before you guys last week at special meeting. At that time, there was concern raised about parking lots specifically, and especially with regards to the language in this ordinance that addresses the prohibition with motorcycles on park property. After further consultation with the police department and reviewing the language in this code, I, at this point, am not concerned with the prohibition as stated in this draft ordinance. The reason being that the police department would not be citing motorcycles in the parking lot of a park if they are street legal. If, however, they were not street legal vehicles, and considering the fact that and those are also prohibited from being in the park, and they'd probably be there for use in the park, that would be the situation in which those vehicles would be ticketed. So given that update, I hope that addresses the concerns that council had last week. I'd be happy to address any further questions about that.
Thank you, Mr. Hayter. Does anybody on council have any questions for staff? Seeing no questions for staff, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first and final reading ordinance 2380 as an emergency ordinance. Councilmember Hurst.
So moved.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first and final reading ordinance 2380 as an emergency ordinance. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, Mr. Gibson, will you please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2380, an emergency ordinance amending sections 11-2100 and 7-1003 of the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code to amend the definition of all-terrain vehicle, expressly prohibit the use of all-terrain vehicles on park property, and establish a minimum fine for the unlawful use of all-terrain vehicles and motorcycles on park property and open space. Your vote is open.
The motion carries 9-0. Would like to say thank you to the city council. I hope this serves as a deterrence to people who are damaging our open space property and making it unsafe for everybody to enjoy. Next up, we have ordinance 2382, recognition of the Click It or Ticket Grant. Does anybody on council have any questions for staff? Seeing no questions for staff, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2382. Councilmember Hurst.
So moved.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2382. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, Mr. Gibson, will you please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2382, an ordinance amending the 2022 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Colorado Department of Transportation grant in the amount of $5,000 for Click It or Ticket and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Your vote is open.
Motion also carries unanimously 9-0. Next up, we'll move on to administrative council business per council policy, except for emergency or unforeseen items. Council members are encouraged to submit administrative business items by the Tuesday before the meeting with another council member's endorsement. At this time, I move that the city staff, in collaboration with the city attorney, prepare a resolution approving the appropriation and expenditure of $2 million for the design and construction of a municipal park on the south side of 96th Avenue in the vicinity of the Second Creek Bridge east of Second Creek Trail. Councilmember Noble.
I second that.
I have a motion and a second to do so. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Noble.
Thank you. I have nothing further to add.
Councilmember Madera.
So I just have a question about the 2K funds, because isn't there an additional $4 million for another park in that same vicinity?
Yes, sir. Second Creek Farm, it's basically located in Second Creek Farm. So, that's part of the dialogue that we'll need to have in terms of, well, actually, let me back up. As I recall, the council bumped that up to $5 million to make it an inclusive park. So that would be part of the 2K bond package that we took to the council last week, or special meeting, yes, last week, sorry, it all runs together. So that's part of the discussion that we need to have with the community and you know, looking at what is necessary. We also have to deal with floodplain and, you know, just make sure that it's sustainable, whatever we do in that area.
So is the intent with this motion to move that second park somewhere else? Because, I mean, we need parks in other places in the city.
The intent of the motion is to direct staff to prepare an ordinance that would allow for this action to take place. The intent of the motion is not to approve the park at this time. It is just to direct staff to prepare an ordinance that we will vote on at a future date.
Okay, I can support that.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion?
The Director of Finance is already drafting up the ordinance.
Thank you, appreciate that. Seeing no other requests for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. As you heard, the Director of Finance is drafting up an ordinance to bring back before the City Council to allocate $2 million for the construction of a park in that location for us to vote on at a future date. Are there any other council members with administrative council business they wish to discuss this evening? Councilmember Noble.
Thank you very much. I don't know if this fits within, it's the only place to put it, administrative council business, which is the faces of our constituents on the screen, on the television, when they are testifying before the council or making citizen communication. When they're at the podium, you can't see their faces. There is a clock instead, a countdown clock. And also, when they are on Zoom, you can't see their faces, although we can see staff faces when they're on Zoom. As I mentioned earlier, civic engagement is a high priority for me, and the fact that people are taking the time to come to our city council meetings in person now and are also still able to do it by hybrid means on Zoom, I think means that we really need to go out of our way to make certain that we can actually, everybody can actually see our residents so that you can see their faces and you can see their passion and their emotion when they are speaking to us. I think that's critical. I would also like to direct staff to prepare an ordinance on impact fees so that we can vote on that sooner than later. That needs to be put into place.
I have a motion to direct staff to prepare an ordinance on impact fees. Is there a second? Councilmember Douglas?
Yes, but I would also like that to include drainage fees as well.
So be it.
Thank you.
I have a motion to direct staff to prepare an ordinance on impact fees. Is there a second?
Does that include the drainage fees? I'd like to second it, but I'd like it to include drainage fees or impact fees as well.
A drainage fee is an impact fee.
Oh, all right, thank you for clarifying. I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second to direct staff to prepare an ordinance on impact fees. Deputy City Manager Rogers?
While he's moving up to a microphone, this is scheduled for an additional session at a study session coming up, I believe on the 11th. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's for the road impact fee and the drainage impact fee coming back at the direction of council. The much larger effort I think Councilmember Noel was speaking about is underway. And I think what's important for all of us is that when we're thinking about an impact fee, based on our impact authority, we have to have an analysis and a methodology in order to back that up. As we currently stand, there's been a discussion about a number of new fees that we've been asked to look at from council over the past 6 to 8 months, spanning back to the last budget season. So where we are at right now is somewhat premature. We are going to be there within the next quarter, at the latest, early of quarter 3 of this year. So the first of quarter 3, at the latest, of having a impact study that will look at a public safety fee that can be applied towards capital improvements for police, looking at a public works fee that can be applied more generally, looking at a parks and rec fee, looking at a trail fee. So once again, being very inclusive with this study for council to be able to take action on. But for any impact fee to be adopted, you have to have an analysis that's been prepared that supports that's being applied to offset that mitigation.
We had an analysis that was presented to us regarding road impact fees and drainage fees.
Correct.
So we could act on those, could we not?
That is correct. So on April 11th, the overall approach for the impact fee is, one, get the road impact fee, get the drainage impact fee, and the approval of council out of the way. But then we would dovetail that, roll that in to the overall total supportable maximum development fee package. So that's taking the public service fee, for an example, with these other fees that have been identified, plus road and impact, so that everybody knows what that total cost per home or per non-residential square foot is going to be. So it's kind of a phased approach, first road and drainage.
I appreciate the phased approach, which is why I'm suggesting the road impact fees and drainage fees come first, and then the other fees that you're talking about can come later.
Correct.
I believe you said the beginning of the third quarter, which would be around July?
That is correct. That is our intent and what we've been shooting for.
So we could then have an ordinance regarding the road impact fees and the drainage fees?
We anticipate that we could have that at the latter half of April. Once again, the meeting in April is that come back with different scenarios on how you could apply the impact fee. One of the things that we took away from that is the potential impact on commercial, as how it was identified from that study being too high to remain competitive, and ultimately looking at the same time, is there a way of being able to apply the fee differently for industrial, and then how does residential occur within that as well? So our staff has been off working on that so that we could present different scenarios for adoption or approval by the council after that April 11th meeting. So that is our goal and hope.
So April 18th, we could then direct staff to bring us back an ordinance on April 18th?
Correct, ma'am.
Okay, then I would amend my motion to prepare an ordinance regarding road impact fees and drainage fees for council approval on April 18th.
I have a motion to amend the motion to prepare an ordinance on impact fees to make it so that that ordinance comes before city council on April 18th. Is there a second to the amendment? Councilmember Douglas?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to amend the original motion to prepare an ordinance on impact fees, which would make that ordinance come before us on April 18th. Is there any discussion? I have a couple of questions for you, Mr. Rogers. In a week, approximately, how many single-family home permits are issued by the city of Commerce City?
Say that one more time, sir.
In 1 week, approximately, how many single-family home permits are issued by the city of Commerce City on average?
On average, we are seeing somewhere between 25 to 30 issued on the high end per week.
All right, so let's take that 30 number. And on average, the increase between the drainage impact fee and the road impact fee was approximately $3,000 in each category for a single-family home, is that correct?
Without having that data in front of me, sir, I have to say that your assumption is probably on point.
So approximately $1,800. 18,000. Oh, whoa. Man, my public math is failing me this evening. Approximately $18,000 a week in impact fees are not being collected by the city of Commerce City by us not moving forward on this in a timely manner. If we push this out to the month of July before we approve that, I think that's going to be an issue. as far as trying to get us back on track with being able to fund key drainage projects and key road projects that we have allocated for the city. That being said, last time you came to us with this, the council was not able to agree on what we wanted to do on the impact fees because of, as you said, the commercial and what we do with the industrial and everything. So my question would be, is it possible we do a phased approach where if we're all in agreement that we're going to charge for this sector, let's get that in front of everybody as quick as possible so that we can get that taken care of?
So I think to your question, Mayor, our intent obviously has never been to push the road and the drainage impact fee to July. That's, once again, the much larger picture. We would just roll what was already approved into the bigger picture so that everybody had a transparent understanding of what will be the ultimate cost at the end of the day, but still to move forward with the drainage and the road impact fee well before that. As it relates to bifurcating the drainage impact fee, so I'm gonna try to hit it on the final point. If we were to pull the residential out today and simply approve the residential today, could we do that and then still have a fruitful discussion, whether it's April 11th, April 18th on commercial and industrial at a subsequent time and approve that kind of in a much more finer kind of phasing approach? Is that what I'm hearing, sir?
Yes, sir.
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, there's nothing within state statute or on our impact authority that would prohibit us from taking that approach if we are, once again, tying ourselves back into the methodology that was presented. Something that we can hang our hat on if we were ever challenged. So you could feasibly take an ordinance on the 4th or on the 18th, pulling the residential out and wanting to move that forward first.
Thank you for those questions. Seeing as we're going to have a meeting on the 11th to discuss impact fees, I hate to tie something down, so I don't think I can support the motion on the table at this time. I think that wait until we have the April 11th meeting and then hope that we move as quickly as possible to getting the impact fee taken care of in any manner that we can possible. Councilmember Hurst?
Yeah, I'm in no way suggesting that I don't support an increase in fees. I just want to make sure that we, on the 11th, can I please request that we get some education on what a nexus study is and exactly how that impacts our decisions? I think that's important. We kind of breezed over it last time because that really lays out the maximum we can charge as well. And then, if possible, I'd really like to take a look at how this translates as a tax. Fees are just taxes. If we put them all together, it's a tax. I want to know how much we'd be paying annually if it was a tax. A fee is a tax. Let's not go into that. I promise I will win that argument.
Okay. But under the law, a fee and a tax are very different.
It's a politician's way to get around letting people vote on taxes. I know.
Just to make sure that we're on the same time here, because taxes have to be approved by vote. I'm happy to have a more detailed discussion at some point, but I don't want, I'd like to avoid comments from the dais that could be interpreted negatively or lead someone to challenge an impact fee unnecessarily.
I'll say it the same thing in a different way. If we were to forego putting fees on each house or each property that wants to develop in here, and we were then to collect the same amount of money through taxes, what does that translate to?
So to your question, sir, yes, we can come back with an educational piece on what is a nexus study and how that controls certain decision-making. And we will work with our staff to see how we can provide numbers and figures in a number of different ways, as you've stated, to provide additional transparency on the discussion.
And I just want to clarify, I think a fee is the right way to go. But I don't think it's when we have those conversations, it's not translatable in the way that's simplified. And so when I think about what am I going to pay annually on this, You know, if it's only $6,000 on my house, then I know I can translate that very quickly over a 30-year loan. But if I'm going to pay for it as a tax broken up over 30 years, is it the same? And I know the answer, and I know how the math works. I'd like to simplify that for everybody.
Right. I think what you're speaking to is more of an excise tax that would be collected at the time, which becomes obviously to your point. So like I said, we will work with Public Works and our finance staff.
So to clarify my point further, we're charging developers, but we end up paying for it. That's all I'm trying to say. So let's talk about that.
Will do, sir.
All right, we have a motion and a second to direct staff to prepare an ordinance on impact fees to be presented to the city council for a vote on April 18th. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay.
I was an aye.
What's that? Let me get a show of hands who opposed so that the city clerk can take note. Yes. Who voted nay? Who voted nay? So it looks like it is going to be Ford, Grimes, Hurst, Huseman, Allen Thomas, and Davis. Is there an additional administrative council business?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
there was a comment earlier that I needed to respond to. That was regarding Zoom and having the citizens appear. The reason that they do not appear is for security reasons. In the past, when Zoom became a thing, that's where Zoom bombing occurred, and that was people posting obscene materials during a meeting when they had access to the video side of things. So that's why our staff prevents the display of a citizen's face or any content that they may have. So that's the reason why we've done it that way. And, you know, if a person wants to have their face appear, they really need to come to the meeting and attend in person. So that would be my response to citizens appearing or having their face appear when they're addressing council.
Councilmember Noble?
I have testified throughout state government, and our faces appear. If you're going to register to speak, then we know exactly who it is who is going to be on camera. It hasn't been an issue at any of the state agencies where I have spoken, and I would still like to see, at a minimum, the people who walk up to the podium, I want to see their faces shown to the rest of the community rather than a clock, so that they can see the superintendent of Adams 14, so they can see school board members, so that they can see parents speaking, so that they can see interested and concerned citizens. I want everybody to have an opportunity to speak to the community rather than just to us.
We will have staff examine the different approaches and see what options we have on that. I would have to defer to our technical staff to see what we can do, but I would think there'd be some way to do that, yes.
That would be good. We just saw Mr. Rogers when he was at the podium, so I think it's possible to be able to see the residents as well.
Councilmember Grimes?
Thanks, Mayor. I was just going to support Councilmember Noble's request. I've watched a number of our court proceedings in the last few months, and I know that through those Zoom interactions, you're able to see whoever's appearing before the judge. So just wanted to offer that as support.
Is there any other administrative council business? Seeing none, we will move on to reports. Mr. Tinklenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. We made an adjustment in the council's upcoming meetings. Originally, we were planning to have council interview city attorney candidates this evening. However, given the amount of material that was coming in the door for this meeting tonight, plus needing some additional time to get background information, do background checks, that type of thing of the candidates, we deferred those interviews to April 4. So at our next regular meeting, there will be 3 hours set aside for interviewing city attorney candidates. As a result of that, we being the staff, met this morning to review the agenda for April 4 and took a rather ruthless approach to moving stuff off of that agenda so that you're not interviewing candidates at midnight. And as a result, we have moved quite a number of things off of the April 4 agenda, moved them to either April 18 or later. And so now this evening, we gathered a couple more items that will be on the April 4 agenda. So I would ask that we not have any additional items, please, for April 4, so that you aren't interviewing candidates again at midnight. So we will have about an hour and a half of council business starting at 6 o'clock, and then hopefully at 7:30 you can start interviewing council candidates, but our city attorney candidates, I'm sorry. But that will be in an executive session because these are semifinalists. They're not finalists yet. Only once the council selects finalists will those be public interviews. Also, staff has been working on an interactive map for capital infrastructure projects, and that will have various information regarding project details and anticipated project completion, as well as boundary of the project. And the goal is to have that map active and posted to our website for the community to view, as well as yourselves, and be able to use that by the end of this month. So hopefully that goes well. And then there's a question regarding the Reunion Town Hall. We have met with Oakwood staff regarding that and have discussed the kind of the format and what it's to cover. The original impetus for, as I recall anyway, the original impetus for that town hall was to talk about the renewal of the consolidated development agreement. With Oakwood's concurrence, we have recommended to you, or we recommend to you to not take action on extending that consolidated development agreement. However, there is a motion on that was adopted to basically hold the town hall and do it by April 18. Mr. Rogers has more information. I'll turn it over to him for a minute to clarify.
Thank you, Roger. To Roger's point, we've had ongoing, continuous conversations with Oakwood, obviously in preparation for the town hall, and the idea of, I'll call it what it is, a reset of coming before City Council to discuss the facts of reunion, discuss other matters as it relates to joint expectations, and being able to further define what does the vision for reunion look like going forward, whether that be the Sports Authority, that being the Reunion Center, or the Master Development Agreement under a different name. They want to have, and we believe it's a prudent conversation with the council of being able to establish that, which will ultimately then help to establish expectations jointly for that town hall that would occur on April 20th. In those conversations, we've also been made aware that this request or idea of extending the consolidated development agreement has probably created some confusion and convolution for all parties involved. And at this point in time, is not necessary for being able to advance the continued build out of reunion, and that having these discussions at a much more higher goal setting, visionary perspective would probably be the best way of actually taking the appropriate steps forward for both the city and for Oakwood as well in wanting to deliver what the community is looking for.
Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. I want to be clear and have it reflected in the record that my motion was never to discuss the CDA publicly in a town hall forum. It was to postpone the discussion of the CDA until we could get clarity on the Sports Authority, because that seemed to be a problem for our community. If we're not getting this, we have no interest in extending this. And so I want to make sure that that's how the motion was originally recorded, and I'm actually relieved that that's no longer going to be a topic of discussion. That was never the intent.
I'll look to Matt to provide a little bit more clarity as to what's been recorded on the record.
I believe possibly the city manager was looking for the language from that motion, but despite your intent, I don't think that was actually what was stated on the record, and if Mr. Rogers, are you able to find that?
Yeah, the motion reads, well, I'll just read the whole thing. A motion was made by Councilmember Grimes, seconded by Councilmember Noble, that this ordinance be continued to the April 18 regular meeting with the condition that staff and Oakwood Homes have a town hall style meeting for the public to discuss the sports and entertainment district as well as the CDA.
So that's how the motion was restated and then voted on, or stated and voted on, I should say.
Well, then that was not my intent, but it sounds like it has resolved to be what the intent was, so thank you.
So I believe the action that we would need to have happen then is to either amend or rescind that motion. Is that correct?
So we're talking about a motion from the previous meeting?
Yes.
And if you want to rescind it, you can, if that's necessary. It sounds like the desire to rescind it is because you're no longer going to be considering an extension of the CDA. Is that accurate?
That was my understanding, yes, as being the intent. But also, as Mr. Rogers had just mentioned, we're no longer looking at a town hall style meeting by the 18th. It would actually be later than that. Again, we don't want to violate council's direction, but situations has changed, and given the fact that our understanding of the motion was that it was to discuss the CDA, but if we're not extending the CDA, then we would still intend to talk about the entire relationship, the need for some type of master development agreement, but it wouldn't be an extension of the old CDA. Does that make sense?
Councilmember Noble?
As the seconder of the motion, I understood it as you read it, to hold the town hall, and there would be discussion of the sports and entertainment area and also points in the consolidated development agreement, just as basically a jumping off point, but not that the consolidated agreement is continuing. It's not continuing, correct? It expired in December, so there is no consolidated development agreement at the moment, correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay, just to confirm that, because I've asked about that before and I think I got a different answer. So I just wanted to make sure that's that's the case. So if there is any change, I'm not completely clear on the change that the motion maker wishes to make, but I would assume, you know, just as has been done before, if anybody wants to rescind, they rescind. And then there's another vote. But what is it that you're trying to do, Councilmember Grimes? And I'm not getting you talking directly into your microphone. So if you could talk directly in your microphone so I can hear you, please.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I didn't bring this up. This was brought up by staff, and so if I need to rescind the original motion, I'm happy to do that. If I don't need to rescind the motion, that's fine too. What I want is for a town hall style meeting to still happen to discuss the overall plan of Oakwood and specifically the Sports and Entertainment District, because that's a promise that our community has perceived from the developer, and I just want to provide an update about what the plans are. It seems prudent to do that, given all of the issues we've had lately regarding development.
If I could possibly simplify this, is it acceptable to council that we hold a town hall style meeting in conjunction somehow with Oakwood and do that basically sometime in April? We're still trying to work out a date, but we're tentatively aiming at the 20th of April. And that it cover the, basically the working relationship as it relates to the Reunion Center, Sports and Entertainment District, and the need for some type of development agreement with Oakwood. Is that consistent with everyone's intent?
Councilmember Grimes.
That is fine with me. Just direct if I need to make a motion to accomplish that, and I'm happy to do so. I also want to point out that this was a request directly from our residents to host this type of meeting, and so that's why I've continued to push that we still have it. And within April, if possible. Well,
Yes.
it is possible. Thanks.
Roger, if I may ask council as well, are you all open to having Oakwood come before you on April 11 at a study session to, once again, discuss obviously items that will be shared with our residents, but ultimately as well, start to have other conversations as it relates around these matters of, once again, expectations on the Sports Authority, Master Development Agreement, reunion build out in general?
That sounds like a great idea. Mr. Tinklenberg, do you want to move forward with your report, please?
Thank you, sir. I will. In terms of community development items, the active land use cases has dropped slightly. We're down to 170 active entitlement applications currently. So far, year-to-date, 254 residential permits have been submitted, and actually 271 have been issued this year, year-to-date, and that's because some carried over from last year. Code enforcement have had 3,334 total cases, and so far have achieved a 98% compliance rate, which is, again, good. Appreciate that compliance from community members. In terms of the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, so far, $1,728,767 have been committed. Again, we're into the second tranche, just as a reminder. Also, the Director for Economic Development sent out a message to City Council earlier, or late last week, I should say, that DPI Specialty Foods, which is a national distribution company, announced that they're eliminating 122 jobs here in Commerce City. will start in May. Also, on April 8th, there'll be a groundbreaking event from 9:30 to 10:30, celebrating the public-private partnership between the city and Cowley companies, and that will bring infrastructure to the east side of E470. And then the Derby Murals Restoration Project kicks off at the end of May, and Ace Hardware has generously donated some of the paint supplies needed for that. And the restoration will be done by Metro State students. And then in terms of Public Works, the I-270 and Vasquez improvements, we're using $600,000 from the Excel Undergrounding Fund to assist with that project. And our staff have met with CDOT about moving the project forward. And they're working on completing the environmental assessment by December of this year. And that's also necessary to meet some of the DRCOG requirements, deadlines on their grants. And so we are, I'll say pushing, that's maybe not the right word, but certainly collaborating with CDOT to advertise for construction by September of next year, again, to meet deadlines for the grants from DRCOG. And then 120th and US 85, we're on track to meet the DRCOG deadline for purchasing right-of-way, which is by June. And they have completed appraisals on 3 properties, and we anticipate making offers on those properties by the end of this month. And then also be submitting additional CRISI grant, CRISI. So waiting on that. Wanted to let you know that the city clerk has sent out the resident surveys regarding the makeup of council districts. And so we're encouraging people to fill those out and get those turned back in. Also, the annual audit, financial audit, is tentatively set to start approximately April 4. So hopefully we're able to stay on track with that. And then have a question regarding the COVID-19 update that the Community Relations Division sends out. Is that still relevant to you, or can we stop sending that out? I'll word it this way. Is it okay with you if we stop sending it out?
Yep.
I see some nods. Okay, thank you. Also have sad news, and that is our city engineer is moving on to a different city. Received an offer of significantly increased salary, and it's a career move for him, but very sad to see him go. So we'll be recruiting for replacing that position. Back to some public works items. We have the Peoria Street Bridge that bottom of the new culvert has been completed, and the walls and bridge deck were poured last week, and also the approach slabs were poured. So we're still on track for paving by the end of this month, again, weather dependent. And then same thing for Brighton Road Bridge. That's being prepped for paving this week. So by the end of the month, again, that one, weather dependent, will be completed. And then 112th Avenue, Chambers to Parkside, seating has been completed, and there's still some concrete work that needs to be addressed. For example, the 12-foot sidewalk has some significant cracking, and those panels will need to be replaced. And then 96th and Landmark, staff installed rubber speed humps and also replaced the delineators around the stop sign that is frequently hit. And so those will be completed when there's a break in the weather as well. We are experiencing some supply chain issues with the granular de-icer called Ice Slicer. We have about 100 tons that are on back order. And again, so depending on weather, we'll see if we make it through. And then work has begun on replacing the irrigation system at the Buffalo Run Golf Course. And so hopefully weather cooperates and we'll be able to get that in place before it impacts customers' use this summer. So that's a very quick update. Any questions on any of that?
Thank you, Mr. Tinklenberg. Does anybody on council have any questions regarding the city manager's report? Seeing none, we'll move on to interim city attorney Matt Hayter.
Do you want a review of the schedule or not?
We can do that next week.
Okay.
I don't have anything for you at this time.
Thank you. Does anybody on council have a report they wish to make? Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick one. Had a good meeting with CCBPA today, and they wanted to bring forward to the city in the near term the possibility of combining Winterfest with our Cereal with Santa event. Number of reasons, and happy to get into a discussion about that, when and if that proposal is brought forward, but just wanted to make council aware that that request will be coming.
Councilmember Madera.
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that the Veterans Commission will be putting on another Veterans Benefit event on April 4th. The last event got canceled due to weather. That's going to be Saturday, April 4th, from, I believe it starts at noon and goes through 4 o'clock. And also, Adams 14 is doing some outreach for their accountability plan and request for proposals for contracting with partner organizations. So they've asked me to participate in some of those meetings and just want to make sure that there's no objections and also encourage our public to get involved in those meetings if they can.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Just heads up, on March 10th, I attended the Senior Commission meeting, and they're real excited. I'm still trying to get a senior resource fair together, and that's anticipated to take place in June. And then on March 17th, I attended the Memorial Day Committee meeting, and we're still hoping that's a go this year. That's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember Noble.
Thank you very much. Yes, I was at the Senior Commission meeting. Also, I participated in a tour put on by EPA Region 8 with the supervisor, Casey Becker. It involved CDPHE, air quality, County Commissioner Emma Pinter, City Council people from Denver, Councilmember Douglas. It was a tour arranged to drive to the various areas in Commerce City and Denver that are along the South Platte and Sand Creek to draw attention of the EPA administrator to the situation for folks who live and work in that area.
Are there any other council members wishing to make a report? Seeing none, I will try to be brief. Last week attended the NANTA Smart Commute meeting. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the Veterans Commission meeting because of an accident on US 36 last week and the Parade Committee meeting because of a scheduling conflict. Had a phone call with a developer who has purchased the northeast corner of 120th Avenue in Buckley and wants to get started on going through the city planning process to develop that into mixed use. And lastly, I'd like to thank Congressman Perlmutter, who secured $615,000 to aid in the quiet crossing efforts in our city. Your work in this first round of congressional directed spending is appreciated by our community. That is all we have for the evening. There being no other business, we are adjourned. Have a good night and have a good week.
Mayor Huesman,
Yes.
we have a executive session.
Oh, crikey.
I'm so sorry.
We're not adjourned. Got to turn the page. Looking for a motion and a second to enter into executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, parentheses 4, sub parentheses B, for the purpose of receiving legal advice related to public disclosure of outside counsel advice and reports on metropolitan and special districts. Councilmember Grimes.
So moved.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to enter into executive session for the purposes stated. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We'll go to executive session. The broadcast and recording will be ended. Have a good night. Have a good week. We'll see you next week for our study session.